This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Kid Naruto was burned alive. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start this story.
Being one of the infamous 3 inches of INT and well known for her hands-on method of obtaining information from inmates, Guy was surprised that Anko would be involved in whatever transpired. With an unarguable tone, he said, "Given that it's about noon, you could probably find her at the dango shop, but I expect to hear what this is about soon, Tenten." She jumped to a nearby roof and started toward the dango shop after saying, "Hi, Guy-sensei. I promised to tell you after I talk with Anko." Guy made a mental note to speak with Anko about why one of his students would need to speak with an INT Neji representative as he watched her go. Lee and Guy exchanged worried glances after noticing Tenten's urgency. Anko sat contentedly eating dango while reflecting on Naruto's cunning. She couldn't help but laugh at the council's expressions, which would make even some demons shudder. Given that Anko had a certain reputation in Konoha, there was one basic fact that everyone who knew her was aware of. An unstable, dangerous, and unexpected Anko was a happy Anko. This would account for the small number of customers at the dango shop, all of whom were seated far from her. Even the employees were avoiding her as much as they could naturally. This only made her happier. The door slammed open. Dragging her away from these thoughts, she turned to look at the source of the commotion and saw a girl wearing a Chinese-style dress with her hair styled in 2 buns. Giving her the appearance of a panda. Anko had to wonder why Tenten was in such a hurry. After recognizing the girl when Tenten approached Anko and took a seat at her table, her interest was piqued even more. Tenten took a glass of water from the waitress and said, "Anko-san, we need to talk. It's about Strife Naruto." "What's the gaki done now?" After a moment of nervous fidgeting, Tenten steeled herself. "He proposed to me this morning, and told me you weren't exactly happy with him this morning. With you being one of his closest friends, I thought that we should talk as I am now his fiancé." Anko arched an eyebrow and gave the girl a serious evaluation, which made her perspire. Even though she didn't flinch, she got up and threw some cash on the table before gesturing for Tenten to follow. "I agree there is much for us to talk about, but not here. We'll talk at my place. I have a feeling this is going to take a while." Tenten was sitting on a couch in Anko's Spartan apartment in the Jonin housing complex 30 minutes later. She was shocked to discover that, despite being a very talented and attractive woman, Anko led a lifestyle that was essentially that of a bachelor. Before the woman with the tea came in from the kitchen and poured Tenten a cup before sitting down, she glanced around the room in an attempt to get a glimpse of Anko's personality. Gazing at the girl, Anko slowly sipped from her own cup. Tenten attempted to strike up a conversation for a short while, but Anko took the initiative after failing. "Since he proposed, I take it you know about the CRA?" "Yes, as a matter of fact, I have been helping him form the groundwork for future clan relations." Anko suspected this and nodded. "Well then, let me ask this, just how much has Naruto told you about me?" Naruto was seen making his final walk toward the academy on Monday morning. As long as it wasn't with the Uchiha or one of the fangirls, he wasn't too concerned about which team he would be assigned to. But his mind was more focused on the next council meeting, which he had talked about with Sarutobi. As he spoke with Tenten, the Hokage had promised to discuss the meeting with Anko. He allowed his body to function automatically as he considered his future and the actions he would need to take to prevent the council, even if they were unaware of it, from making his life worse than it already was. He was so engrossed in his thoughts that Tenten's tackle to the ground in front of the academy gates took him completely by surprise. He began to say, "Ten-chan, wah," but Tenten, who was now straddling him, grabbed him by the collar and gave him a passionate kiss until they parted for air. Naruto wrapped his arms around her waist and kissed her again. He said, with a little laugh, "Well, good morning to you too, Ten-chan." She blushed a little, and those around her laughed. Tenten pushed Naruto back to the ground and leaned over him when she realized they had an audience. She traced his jawline with a finger and said, sensuously half smiling, "If you like that, just imagine what you would have gotten if you had stayed for breakfast." She quickly planted another kiss on Naruto's lips as he opened his mouth to reply, then quickly flipped into a crouch and slowly stood up, making sure he could see her ass well. Tenten then turned to face him, grinning at the expression on his face as he observed her physique. She simply walked away with a sway in her hips that made promises for the future after saying, "Good luck, Naruto-koi." As he lay on the ground, Naruto watched her go, wondering what exactly she had planned. He got to his feet, cleaned himself up, and went inside. Once she was out of sight, when he arrived at class, he sat down as usual and took out a scroll to pass the time until team placement started. He was reading the scroll when Iruka entered and started announcing the teams, and he only paid half attention until a pink-haired fangirl screamed, "Eat that, Ino pig! Sasuke-kun is all mine now!" exclaimed the pink-haired fangirl, ignoring the disgusted expression on her crush's face. With a stern expression, Iruka said, Settle down, Sakura, before I decided to send a report to your Jonin-sensei. The girl was forced to sit down again. Now, as I was saying, Team 7 is Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Inuzuka Kiba. Team 8 is Aburame Shino, Hinata Hyuga, and Strife Naruto. Team 9 is still on active duty, so the next is Team 10 Akamichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru, and Yamanaka Ino. Now that everyone knows their teams, I suggest you get to know each other better, and meet back here after lunch so your Jonin-sensei can pick you up. Good luck everyone. Haruka finished up his paperwork, left the space. While some went to talk with friends, the majority of the graduates reorganized into their teams. Naruto chose to sit next to Hinata and Shino because they were already seated close to one another. Shino greeted him by saying, "Greetings, Strife-san." Naruto sat beside him, Hinata on the other side of Shino, and asked, "How ya doin', Shino?" In his typical monotone, Shino stated, "I am well, my father sends his regards, and it has been decided that I will be the one to test those weapons." Hearing this, Naruto grinned. "That is good to hear. Please tell Shibi-san that I am greatly honored by this, and what we discussed will be part of today's council meeting." "That is interesting. I take this to mean something has happened to cause such a drastic alteration to your stated plans?" "Hi, as I am sure you are aware, unexpected events can change even the best laid plans. It is not something to worry about, though in actuality it makes some aspects easier for me even with the advanced timetable." As the heiress of the Hyuga clan, Hinata was intrigued by what they were talking about because it sounded very much like clan business, and she could tell Shino was speaking like a clan head's heir. It goes without saying that this piqued her interest since, to the best of her knowledge, Naruto was not a clan member. Not wanting to offend them in case it was clan business, she said, Anyo, what are you talking about?" Wondering why Naruto had left the Hyuga out of his plans, Shino raised an eyebrow at Naruto. After noticing the expression, Naruto shook his head to confirm that he had not gone to the Hyuga before turning to face Hinata. The intensity of the gaze caused the girl to blush, but not nearly as much as she would have before the death of the boy she loved. She looked him in the eyes, drawing strength from her determination to become a woman and a kunoichi. He would be proud of. Naruto made his choice after a moment and nodded to himself. "What I am about to tell you has been kept secret as per the laws concerning inter-clan relations and personal clan activities. I am telling you this for two reasons. The first is that we are teammates, and in order for a team to succeed there must be trust. The second is that as clan heiress you will no doubt find out about it after tonight's council meeting from your father. I will require you to promise that you will not say anything about this until after Hiyashi-san has talked with you about what the council meeting revealed." The seriousness of Naruto made the heiress hesitate for a moment before responding. She raised her head and spoke in a formal tone, indicating that she was not referring to him as a teammate but rather as the heiress of the Hyuga clan. "You have my oath. Strife-san, I pledge not to breath a word of what you are about to tell me until the time is appropriate or with others you deem fit." After bowing his head in recognition of her oath, Naruto turned to face Shino and asked him quietly if he wanted his clan's involvement to be known. He received a small nod in response. "Hinata-san, I have made the decision to rebuild my clan here in Konoha, and after discussing this with Hokage-sama I started approaching some of the clans to gain support for when I made the announcement. I had originally planned for this to happen at a later date, but due to certain events I was forced to make the announcement early at the council meeting that will be held later today. I knew that I would have very little chance of success at this without revealing things I didn't want to until the announcement, so I approached some of the clans such as the Aburame with what you could call a good faith offering." Before an idea came to her, Hinata was shocked that someone so young would engage in such political gameplay. "Strife-san, why have you not approached the Hyuga about this? We are after all the most influential and powerful clan in Konoha." "That is a good question, Hinata-san. When I was thinking of which clans to approach, and what I could offer in exchange for their support, I could think of nothing that your clan couldn't either get on its own or wouldn't reject because of your clan's philosophy towards the almost exclusive use of Juken." When the lunch bell rang, they stopped talking and decided to reconvene at the same location after lunch. Following their meal, they went back to the classroom and engaged in small talk until the Jonin who would oversee the teams began to arrive. After only a few minutes of waiting, their sensei arrived, and Naruto was taken aback by who it was. "Kurenai-chan, I didn't know you were going to be a Jonin sensei this year since you only recently became a Jonin." With a slight smile, Kurenai turned to face Naruto and said, "I was hesitant about it, Naruto-kun, but after talking with the Hokage and Anko I thought it would be a good idea. By the way, do you care to explain why Anko has been so eager to get her hands on you?" "Hey, I think I have an idea, but I've been avoiding her since the last I remember she tried to pin me to a wall with kunai. I honestly didn't know she'd be so upset about it." Knowing that Anko was genuinely ecstatic about what Naruto had told her made Kurenai laugh. "She's not upset. Naruto-kun, as a matter of fact, she can't wait to see the look on the council's faces when they find out that she has accepted your offer. Enough chit-chat. I want you three to meet me by the pond that's used for jutsu practice, where we will start our first team meeting. Kurenai utilized Shunshin following their confirmation. When the graduates arrived, Kurenai was already seated by the pond, as was to be expected, and she gestured for them to take a seat before continuing. This will just be a quick meeting before we meet up again tomorrow. I want each of you to introduce yourselves' name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, and goals. I'll start off so you have an idea of what I mean. My name is Yuichi Kurenai, rookie Jonin, as I only got the promotion a few months ago. I like strawberries, my best friend Mitarashi Anko, romance novels, and flower arrangements. I dislike perverts, spicy food, and people that think kunoichi are weak. My hobbies are genjutsu, stargazing, and calligraphy. My goals are to prove that kunoichi can be just as powerful as shinobi, and to help you grow as a true sensei should. Shino nodded in agreement. My name is Aburame Shino, heir to the Aburame clan. I like studying bugs, and finding new or rare ones that do not live around Konoha. I dislike the reaction most people have to bugs because of their ignorance about them. My hobbies are searching for new bugs to add to my clan's store, and reading. My goal is to become a shinobi worthy of being a future clan head, and to eliminate some of the weaknesses in my family's jutsu. Kurenai nodded to Hinata and said, "Okay, you're next." Before speaking, Hinata got to her feet and bowed to the assembly. I am Hyuga Hinata, heiress of the Hyuga clan. I like pressing flowers, ramen, and gardening. I dislike people that form opinions about others without getting to know them. Kumogakure, and the caged bird seal. My hobbies aside from my likes are training, and helping out at the food kitchens run by my clan. My goal is to become clan head so I can get rid of the use of the caged bird seal, and to grow to be a kunoichi that my Uzumaki-kun would be proud to have had by his side. This startled Naruto, who raised his voice. Uzumaki? Do you mean Uzumaki, Naruto? A thought of her lost love crossed Hinata's mind, causing her to blush slightly. He was my childhood love until he died a few years ago. He inspired me to become stronger and more confident. I would not be the woman I am today if it wasn't for him. Naruto grinned, relieved that someone didn't despise him prior to his disappearance. I am sure he would be proud of you, Hinata. From what I know, he had a hard life, and I am glad not everyone despised my brother. Brother? Exclaimed Hinata, looking at Naruto and seeing him nod. Yes, he was my brother. We were twins. I knew very little of him until I had returned here, and was given the few possessions he had. Most of what I know came from the journals he kept. At this information, Shino had arched an eyebrow and put it away for later, since this is supposed to be a secret. Kurenai's eyes had widened in surprise, just staring at the man she had just learned was the brother of the now deceased boy she had given her heart to. Left Hinata speechless. Naruto, feeling uneasy about the stares he was receiving, decided it would be best to shift the topic before they began asking him questions he didn't want to answer. I guess it's my turn to introduce myself. My name is Strife Naruto, clan head of the Strife clan, and holder of the Strife bloodline. I like training, reading, spending time with friends, and nature. I dislike people that try to take advantage of others, fangirls, people with an arrogantly superior attitude, and seeing a woman being hurt. My hobbies include philosophy, kenjutsu, poetry, and helping out at the Hisagia weapon shop. My goal is to rebuild the Strife clan here, and be a good father. Kurenai was shocked that he had revealed something he had kept so secret, but he dismissed it as his personal information. Kurenai dismissed her team and proceeded to the Hokage's office via Shunshin. Now that introductions are over, I'll tell you what our team is up for next tomorrow. I will be assessing your skills with the exception of Naruto. We will meet up at Training Ground 27 at 8 AM. After that is done, we'll get lunch, and head to the mission hall for our first mission as a team. The Shinobi Council and the Civilian Council were the two divisions of the Council of Konoha. The names make it clear that the Shinobi side dealt with ninja matters, while the civilian side dealt with Konoha's non-ninja aspects. The members of the Civilian Council were chatting among themselves as usual as they waited for the Hokage to begin the meeting. The majority of the clan heads were silent, which was unusual for the Shinobi Council, which was composed of clan heads and a few other high-ranking ninja. Hiyashi pondered whether they were aware of the Hokage's impending enigmatic announcement for a number of reasons. He wasn't overly concerned. He was essentially untouchable and the leader of the Hyuga clan. His ability to read body language was unrivaled by anyone on the Hyuga clan council, and he could tell they were patient rather than anxious or excited in a manner that reminded him of someone going over a previous speech. As soon as the doors opened, the conversation slowed down to focus on Hiruzen Sarutobi Sandaime, the Konoha Hokage. Even though he was getting close to his 7th decade of life, his demeanor conveyed that he was a tough guy who could still prove it if necessary. He took a seat in his chair and spoke to the council members gathered. When he received no response other than Nara Shikaku stopping his nap and sitting up, He gestured to the Anbu at the door. As you have heard, there is to be a special announcement made during this meeting. Now before we begin, does anyone have anything to say? Naruto entered after the Anbu opened the door and bowed to the council and then the Hokage. Now that we are all gathered, I will give the floor to Strife Naruto so he can explain the situation. Naruto turned to face the council after saying, "Thank you, Hokage-sama. I am Strife Naruto, a recent graduate of the academy. I have come to announce my desire to rebuild my clan here in Konoha. The Strife clan has a bloodline that enables the use of some jutsu without the need for hand seals, and increased healing among other things. I know of the laws regarding bloodline clans, and will submit to the CRA. In fact, there are 2 women that have already agreed to marry me. I know the minimum number of wives under the CRA is 3, and that anyone must have at least that number by the age of 19 or be forced into a marriage arranged by the council and the Hokage. Seeing as I am currently 15, that gives me 4 years to find one more wife. I have also already discussed with Hokage-sama about the purchase of land for my clan, and he has agreed to it with the council's approval." One of the civilian council members in charge of land development stood up when Naruto stopped talking. The councilor, who was in charge of construction in Konoha and would receive a portion of the profits from any new construction, said with a gleam in his eyes, "Where is this land you wish to purchase? Even though you are rebuilding your clan from scratch, the need for future growth must be taken into consideration, and there are not that many places available right now." After puffing on his pipe, Sarutobi responded, "Your question is a good one, and will be addressed as such. Strife-san and I have decided on what we both think is an appropriate place. It used to belong to a clan that has died out, and as such will only require a small amount of repair, and should be enough for a growing clan for several generations for a moderate price. I have decided to sell Strife-san the old Namikaze clan estate." Sarutobi ignored the council's protests and let them have their outburst while puffing on his pipe. The shinobi council was nearly silent, despite a few shocked looks, while the civilian council was largely in a frenzy. Although the uninformed shinobi council member opposed the sale of the Yondaime's estates, they had to concede that having a clan with the bloodline described would be very beneficial. This continued for a few minutes before the Hokage raised his hand and silenced everyone. "I understand that many wish for the Yondaime's estates to remain empty out of respect, so I will allow your questions to be answered." This time, it was another civilian council member who took the stand. She was a fierce advocate for Uchiha Sasuke and went by Haruno Ayaka with the typical loudness of Haruno clan females. She uttered, "What makes him worthy of having the Namikaze estate? We know nothing about him or his clan. To my knowledge, he wasn't even in Konoha until he started the academy late last year." Sarutobi pointed to Naruto and remarked, "Those are valid points, Haruno-san, and I shall let Strife-san answer them." With a bow, he turned to the councilwoman and said, "Thank you, Hokage-sama. What I am about to tell you has been deemed a S-class village secret by the Hokage, and is punishable by imprisonment and interrogation for you, your family, and anyone you may tell. I am actually the adopted son of the Strife clan head that resides on the southern continent. Years ago they found a way to pass on their bloodline fully intact through a very intense ritual, which is how I carry it now. Before you ask, I will state that I will not be passing that knowledge along, as it constitutes as a clan jutsu as well as a kinjutsu. With that being said, I am the biological son of Uzumaki Kushina, who was heiress to the royal line of Uzu no Kuni before it was destroyed, and Minato Namikaze the Yondaime Hokage. I am also the twin brother of Uzumaki Naruto. The identities of the rest of my family have been deemed an SS class secret, and will not be revealed at this time." Many of the counselors had known Kushina during her lifetime, so they were shocked to learn that the woman, Akai Chishio no Habanero, was not only a princess but also the mother of the demon boy. However, this was nothing compared to learning that Minato had 2 sons, one of whom was Kyuubi no Yoko's host. Naturally, though not as much as some had anticipated, there was a commotion when they learned that the boy in front of them was related to the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. As they processed the news, the few who were aware of Kushina's marriage to Namikaze Minato reacted much more quietly. Sarutobi flared his ki, bringing silence to the room as he grew weary of the commotion. "I understand this news may be somewhat unsettling to some of you, but I will not let old hatreds for a demon long dead affect matters that involve this village, since protocol has been followed, and I am acting as his sponsor in this. I will now call for the required vote to allow the Strife clan to take root in Konoha. Those in favor please stand up." The majority of the major clans rose up very rapidly, followed by the remaining shinobi council members and a small number of civilian council members, making up 70% of the council. Before formally announcing Naruto's seat on the council and the Strife clan's admission to Konoha, Sarutobi took the time to record each vote. Sarutobi pointed to a vacant seat on the shinobi side of the council and said, "Please take the seat due you as clan head, Strife-san." Now that has been taken care of, are there any more questions before we continue? Standing up, a minor counselor declared, I have one. Hokage-sama. Strife-san has mentioned that he already has 2 of the fiancés required for the CRA. I ask that the council be informed as to their identities. Knowing what was about to happen, Sarutobi barely stopped his smile from turning savage at the sound of this. Speaking to an Anbu wearing a cat mask near the door, he concluded, I think that is a reasonable request, and with Strife-san's approval the ladies in question are waiting outside. If you would be so kind, Neko-san. Before heading out to retrieve the ones that were requested, the named Anbu bowed. After a few minutes, Neko and Morino Ibiki entered, and the door was reopened. Ibiki grinned at the terrified response to his presence. He moved to stand by the Hokage's desk after saying, It is my pleasure to announce the future mothers of the Strife clan. Hisagia Tenten entered the room first, wearing a formal kimono. Mitarashi Anko, who had changed out of her usual clothes, came next, wearing a sophisticated ankle-length form-fitting dress with a slit on the right side that extended up to her mid-thigh. While the rest of the council had mixed feelings about the performance, a few men whistled in admiration. Even though it left little room for interpretation, the shinobi side was horrified to see Anko wearing clothing that covered so much of her body. They also had to respect Naruto for having the audacity to approach such a dangerous woman. The civilian side expressed their displeasure at the idea of a student of one of Konoha's biggest enemies and traitors becoming the wife of a prince in order to compete with a jonin. Naruto leveled enough ki at the civilian council and moved in front of his fiancés. As he glared around him, Naruto's ki jumped even higher, becoming nearly palatable. If anyone has issue with either of these women, keep it out of the council room, and should anyone try to harm them, he said. Naruto maintained the glare and ki for a few more minutes to ensure the point was understood, then turned to the women and turned off both like a switch. I will make it clear that they will be moving to the Strife estate tomorrow, and any attempts against them will cause the Shinigami to shudder at their fate. Naruto took both of their hands and gave them a quick kiss. Why don't you two head home and pack? Tomorrow will be a long day, and I don't want you to overexert yourselves. Before leaving the council chamber as though nothing had happened, Tenten and Anko both gave him a smile and a kiss on the lips. One of the members of the civilian council was heard saying something extremely foolish just as they were ready to enter. It's somewhat fitting the snake whore is marrying into the demon brat's family. Everyone in the room felt the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end, as though a ruthless apex predator was going to rip them to pieces. And Naruto stopped motionless. Naruto slowly spun around to face the person who had spoken, his eyes narrowing a little as he held up his hand palm out to the man. Thundaga. He practically snarled, sending a thick lightning bolt at the man that briefly blinded everyone in the room. They saw the counselor, or what was left of him. After their eyesight cleared and their ears ceased to ring, he had a smoking hole in his chest that would have left nothing for his arms to be attached to if it were just a few inches larger, and he was sitting motionless against the wall behind where he had been sitting. This caused everyone in the room to stare in disbelief until one of the Uchiha's strongest supporters broke the hush. He murdered a member of the council, arrest him. The idiot received Naruto's glare, but his words were delivered with a menacing composure. I merely followed the law set down by the Hokage 15 years ago. What law? The arrogant man insisted as though requesting permission. Naruto glanced at Tenten and then at Sarutobi, receiving a slight nod in return. He turned his head to a deep shadow when the renowned Black Ops squad was mentioned. The law he broke is the one making the information about the Kyuubi no Kitsune no Yoko being spoken of only in the presence of those that already knew. Violation of the law is counted as treason, and punishable by death. Isn't that right, Anbu-san? The captain of the Anbu squad, whose duty it was to protect the chamber, surprised many of the counselors by coming out and bowing to Naruto. That is quite right. Strife-san, his life became forfeit as soon as those words left his mouth. Since Tenten-san is in the room, I don't suppose you'd be willing to join Anbu when you make Chunin, would you? The captain's voice was full of laughter. Naruto grinned and gave a small shake of his head. Sorry, Anbu-san, but I plan on concentrating on my clan for the next few years, maybe after things have settled down, but right now I have to say no. The captain of Anbu turned to Anko and laughed. I don't suppose you'd let me have first dibs on him if he decides to join, would you, Anko-san? Before responding, Anko allowed her smile to turn a little feral after saying her piece. She approaches Naruto in a flowing manner and gives him a gentle peck on the lips. Sorry, but there is no way I'm pulling my claws out of him. I'll see you at home, Anata-sama. Tenten quickly followed her, giving him a slightly longer kiss with a charming smile. She and Anko walked out of the room, leaving the counselors alone. Don't take too long, Naruto-koi. As a lower-ranking Anbu member began dragging the body out the door, Sarutobi remarked, well, now that's taken care of, we can take a small recess for refreshment while the trash is taken out. When Naruto arrived at his team's training grounds the following morning, He suppressed a yawn since Kurenai had stated that she would not be assessing his abilities. He had considered arriving late, but he believed it would be an excellent opportunity to speak with Shino about assisting him in training with the unique tonfas. He noticed Shino and Hinata were already in the clearing when he entered. He greeted them with a drowsy wave and said, "Morning." "Good morning, Naruto-kun," Hinata said, giving him a strange look. Seeing the expression, Naruto said, "Something wrong, Hinata? My father told me about what happened at the council meeting. Are you really the last of the royal line of Uzu no Kuni, and son of the Yondaime?" Naruto nodded his head and sighed, wishing he had slept in. She opened her mouth to ask another question, but he stopped her with a raised hand. "Yes, I am. My mother was the only survivor from when Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri destroyed the country in the last war. Before you ask, I won't tell you about my father Minato's side of the family, and why it is an SS-class secret. There are only 3 people in the village that know that information, including myself. My fiancés don't even know. For their protection, if the knowledge got out, there is a good chance it would start another war." When Hinata heard this, her eyes widened like saucers, and she gasped, but Shino only arched an eyebrow. Shino expressed his curiosity by saying, "That is very interesting, Naruto-san. But why would a war result from the knowledge of your lineage? Let's just say that my father's side of the family has had an ungodly influence on the elemental nations going back to the start of the shinobi era, and leave it at that. By the way, Shino, I wanted to talk with you about helping you train with the weapons I gave you," Naruto said in an attempt to redirect the discussion. "That would be greatly appreciated, Naruto-san." Before they could elaborate, Kurenai descended from a tree, accompanied by a purple-haired Anbu, and approached the genin that had gathered. "I'm glad to see you are all here. There has been a slight change of plans after talking with Hokage-sama. He has decided he wants a thorough evaluation of your skills without your bloodline, Naruto-kun, and has chosen Neko-san to assist me with that. While she is evaluating you, I will be doing the same with Hinata and Shino. If you have any questions, I suggest we get them out of the way now." Naruto said, "I have one, Kurenai-chan." He then cracked his neck to release the stiffness. "Why does the Hokage think it's needed for an Anbu to gauge my skills? I thought he already had a good idea of what I can do, considering what me and Enko-chan have done to training ground 44 in our spars. That is why Hokage-sama thought it was necessary, Naruto-san. I was chosen because I am one of the few Kenjutsu specialists in Konoha, and can rate your swordsmanship accordingly. Also, as an experienced Anbu, I should be able to withstand anything you do as long as you refrain from using whatever techniques you used to level parts of the Forest of Death. Hokage-sama also wants to make sure you will be able to protect yourself and your clan as would be needed of a founding clan head with bloodline." Although he didn't particularly like the idea, Naruto nodded in agreement. Hinata gazed at Naruto in astonishment, wondering why he was a genin if he was as strong as she had heard. As all of this was happening, Shino made a buzzing noise as he spoke with his hive in an attempt to comprehend the ramifications of this new knowledge about his teammate. "I guess I don't have a choice since this was ordered by the Hokage. Are there any other restrictions besides the use of my bloodline, Neko-san?" Naruto said with a sigh. "No, there isn't, Naruto-san. You can use anything else during our spar, though I ask you to refrain from attacks that are instantly lethal. We can begin whenever you are ready." Naruto spoke to Kurenai while rolling his shoulders. Naruto turned to face the cat-masked Anbu and said, "Just for this, I should invite Enko-chan for lunch, and make you pay for her dango, Kurenai-chan, but I won't since you're only following orders." When he saw the blade she had chosen, he pulled out his sword and used a seal to send a scimitar flying. After swiftly sheathing his larger sword, Naruto reverse grasps the scimitar before he halted in a position with his right side facing the Anbu. The blade was launched into motion, spinning from hand to hand behind his back in a brief demonstration of skill. With his left arm held bent to the side and the blade pointing skyward, the scimitar came to a stop pointed forward in a standard grip. Neko took her own stance, carefully drew her double-edged sword, and took a moment to assess Naruto before striking. She struck his chest with a horizontal slash of her sword, which collided with his blade in a steely screech. Naruto countered with a spinning slash directed at her knees, using the blade's curve to deflect his opponent's ducked low. Neko sidestepped this by flipping around in front of Naruto, bringing her blade down in an overhand strike. Naruto, who was still crouching, prevented this by using his left hand to support the blade's blunt side close to the tip. Grinning, he thrust his blade to the left and forward. Releasing it, Neko jumped several feet back as he curved his sword downward and then raised it in a diagonal slash. She jumped into a nearby tree, Naruto swiftly following, saying, "I'm impressed, Naruto-san, your Kenjutsu skills are quite good. Now let's see how you do in a restricted environment." The pair vanished into the forest, leaving the rest of the team in awe of the speed and skill they had just witnessed. Kurenai turned to the rest of her team as the ring of steel began to reverberate through the trees. She looked at Shino for a moment, then nodded. As much as I'd like to watch the rest of the spar, I still have to evaluate your skills. Okay, Shino, you're first. Kurenai had completed her evaluations more than 45 minutes earlier, and since Naruto and Neiko had not yet returned, she was beginning to worry. Only the sporadic clash of steel and the occasional explosion alerted her to the fact that they were still sparring. As she began to consider ending the fight, Neiko and Naruto emerged from the woods in quick succession after flipping herself to stand. Neiko signaled to Naruto to stop by raising a hand. Kurenai was taken aback by her observations. They both had numerous cuts and bruises, appeared battered, and were generally unkempt. As Naruto sealed his scimitar, Neiko leaned on her sword, which she had stabbed into the ground to catch her breath. Wiping the perspiration from his brow, Naruto remarked, "That was a good spar, Neiko-san. I haven't had a fight on that level in a long time." As she placed her sword in the sheath over her right shoulder, she remarked, "I have to agree, Naruto-san, your skills easily put you at high chunin if not low jonin when you go all out." The mask, which was already severely damaged, must have been unable to withstand the motion because it abruptly collapsed, exposing the female ANBU's face and making Naruto whistle. "Wow, skilled and beautiful whoever your boyfriend is. He is one lucky guy. Can I ask your name so I can congratulate him on catching your attention?" The compliment made Neiko smile. "My name is Azuki Yugao, and just how would you know I have a boyfriend?" Naruto flared his nostrils and tapped the side of his nose as he smiled at her. Yugao gave him a perplexed look before blushing when she understood what he meant. Kurenai took advantage of the situation by approaching them and speaking to Yugao. Kurenai asked, "Were you able to get an accurate gauge of his skill, Neiko-san? To remind Yugao of their original purpose?" Before responding, the purple-haired Anbu looked at Naruto. "Yes, I did, Kurenai-san. And I must say that I am very impressed at his skill overall. I would say he is at high chunin or low jonin level in combat, but his skill in kenjutsu is easily mid jonin. If his skills continue to improve, he could very easily get into Anbu when he makes chunin." Hearing this, Kurenai was taken aback. Although she was aware of Naruto's strength, she was unaware of his full extent. She couldn't help but wonder how the assessment would have changed if he had used his bloodline in the spar. Even though he hadn't, well, that is certainly a surprise. It looks like I'll have to talk with Hokage-sama about this after he has had a chance to go over your report. Thank you for your help with this. Neiko-san, is there anything else? I'd like to take my team for lunch before we get a mission." Yugao shook her head. Glancing at the sun's position, she started to leave but stopped a few feet from the edge of the clearing and said, "No, Kurenai-san, my report will be on the Hokage's desk tomorrow if you want to ask Hokage-sama about it." Before leaving with Shunshin, she said over her shoulder, "If you are looking for a good sparring partner, I suggest you look up Hayate Gecko. He might even be able to give you a few pointers." A knock on the door interrupted Sarutobi as he was reading Icha Icha on the couch in his office while two of his Kage Bunshin completed paperwork. Reluctantly, he put the book away and then motioned for the person to come in. He smiles when he sees Yugao and motions for her to take a seat. Stuffing tobacco into his pipe, he said, "You look tired. I hope you didn't run into any trouble after testing Naruto." Yugao shook her head and laughed briefly. "I didn't run into any trouble unless you count that I spent 2 hours fighting Naruto." At this, Sarutobi arched an eyebrow, becoming increasingly interested in what she would report. Was he that good? As she inhaled deeply before delivering her report, Yugao nodded. "He's even better. It was a simple skill test with only one restriction. He couldn't use his bloodline even without being able to use that. Impressive as it is, he is at the very least high chunin level. If it had been a serious fight, and he used his bloodline, I would probably be dead right now." Flashback after the last conversation, Yugao had her leaning against a tree to catch her breath. The boy's endurance and skill astounded her. He had avoided the majority of her blows and even engaged her in kenjutsu on an equal basis. She shook her head in amazement at the amount of training he had undergone to reach his current level at such a young age. By all rights, he ought to be promoted to chunin, if not tokubetsu jonin, which is what she prefers. She believed that anyone who could match an ANBU's level of skill, as he had been doing for more than an hour, deserved it. If he became serious and used his bloodline, she would most certainly not want to fight him since she had already narrowly avoided taking significant blows multiple times. She could tell that this fight would have ended long ago if he had been using it. She sprang into a defensive stance as soon as she heard a noise on a nearby branch, swiftly glancing around, keeping her senses sharp. She sighed when she saw nothing and leaned back against the tree. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she stiffened when her back struck something that was most definitely not wood. How in the world did he ambush me in that manner? After giving it some thought, she stepped forward slowly and turned to Naruto. He leaned casually against the tree and said, "Yo." He was beaming from ear to ear, sliding his sword into his belt. He started creating hand seals and said, "You know, I'm getting kind of hungry. How about we finish this?" After Yugao hurried to stop him, Naruto dodged the blow and moved behind her defense. Yugao was sent flying through the trees as the Naruto clone exploded just inches from her, yelling, "Bunshin Daibakuha," in a split second. End of flashback. To be honest, I am afraid of what he can do with his bloodline, Hokage-sama. I was able to get a reading of his chakra during our fight, and I nearly puked at what I felt unless he was actively using it. His chakra was undetectable, but when he did, I could swear it was almost tangible. I think he is at mid-Jonin level with his bloodline. But the only way to be sure would be to have Kakashi or yourself test him if someone else were to face him in a no-limits match. I honestly don't know if they would survive or even be able to have a shinobi career. Sarutobi leaned back on the couch and smoked his pipe deeply as he took in the information. He was aware that Naruto had become much stronger than he had been before, but he felt both proud and uneasy to think that he was this strong without even using the Gaia-specific skills. As Hokage, he had to put aside his grandfatherly feelings for Naruto and look at this objectively. From that perspective, he saw how valuable Naruto and his future clan could be, but he was also very worried about what would happen if he decided to exact revenge on the village for the way he had been treated when he was younger. He had witnessed some of the training that Naruto and Enko had done after they leveled a portion of the Forest of Death, and he was genuinely afraid of what would happen if he used his power against Konoha, realizing that, in the best-case scenario, only half of Konoha would be ash before he was stopped. As the boy's unofficial grandfather, however, he couldn't help but feel proud of his newfound skill and the power he would possess when he became a Jonin. He pictured a Naruto 10 years older, radiating power after surpassing his father and taking the mantle of Godem Hokage from him to become one of the greatest ninja in history. His thoughts lingered for a few minutes before he drew out his pipe and emitted a thick cloud of smoke. Yugao-san, you've given me a lot to consider. Even though I have faith in Naruto, as Hokage, I can't help but wonder if he is waiting for the ideal moment to exact revenge on his brother, as many would do in his place. Personally, I don't think so, but we can't be too cautious. Sarutobi sighed deeply, stroking his hair, wishing he didn't have to make the tough decisions that came with being Hokage. What do you think of him personally, Yugao-san? Do you believe we can trust him, or should we be on the lookout for hidden agendas? As she considered the question carefully, Yugao, who was only aware of the official version, scowled and said, "I believe he can be trusted, Hokage-sama. He has only demonstrated a desire to harm those who wish him or those he cares about harm. I didn't feel the need to hurt other people or the desire for vengeance. Yes, he wants to beat the living daylights out of those who killed and injured his brother, but since Uzumaki passed away that night, there is nothing he can do to help him. But he won't think twice about punishing anyone who tries to do the same to him as he did to his brother. To tell the truth, if I had been Hokage-sama, I would have joined the warpath." After giving her words a nod, Sarutobi let out a long sigh and said, "Thank you, Yugao-san. I sincerely appreciate your candor regarding this matter. I'll have the documents for a week of paid vacation if you return here after you've been checked out at the hospital after competing against a B-plus class ninja, even if he is only a genin, and for your honesty today. I believe you deserve it. Additionally, you're not allowed to discuss the test or our conversation with anyone." Although Yugao was taken aback by the paid vacation, he didn't take advantage of the good fortune. "Hi, Hokage-sama, I'm going to the hospital right now if nothing else comes up." Sarutobi waved dismissively, grinned, and took the necessary documents off his desk. Mitarashi Anko lived in one of the standard Jonin apartment complexes, even though she had more than enough money to buy her own house from her well-paying job at Konoha's interrogation and torture division of Anbu. There were many reasons for this. Some were political, some were personal, but the main one was that despite her reputation, her life was very lonely, and by living in the complex she could pretend she was just an ordinary Jonin, not the hated ex-student of Konoha's greatest traitor. After she had gotten home, she had sealed most of her personal items in scrolls, planning on hiring a genin team to move the rest of her things, and fell asleep after drinking a bottle of sake. Needless, she was surprised that her breakfast was interrupted by 10 Naruto clones that were sent to help her move. This is why she was taking one last look around her now empty apartment, thinking about the life that was ending, and the new one that was about to start, with a smile and bounce in her step that was usually only seen when there was some fresh meat to torture. Enko locked the door for the last time, and started to follow the remaining clones to her new home when her good friend and boss made his presence known. "Hi, Anko, thank goodness I caught you before you departed. The Hokage told me a few things yesterday after the council meeting. I need to talk to Strife Naruto about a few things because of what I was told. Can you tell me where I can locate him?" Morino Ibiki, a very menacing man, inquired. "Boss is at the Akamichi restaurant that specializes in food from the Land of Clouds with his team," one of the clones responded. Before Anko could respond, they had lunch with Kurenai-chan before receiving a mission. The clone said. Boss dispelled the clone that relayed the progress of the move to him. Ibiki and Anko were shocked to see that the clone was aware of this information. Ibiki gave the clone a nod and said, "You can take the next 3 days off to settle in as we're slow at INT right now. Enjoy your vacation, but I'll have to call you back early if something comes up." Anko smiled and nodded. Thinking about how she would spend the next 3 days, Ibiki vanished with a shunshin to meet Naruto, and when he got there, he briefly observed through the window that they were almost finished with lunch before entering the restaurant. Kurenai was taken aback to see one of the most feared men in Konoha at the table, and he was quite anxious about the look he was giving Naruto. "Hi, Ibiki-san, can we be of any assistance to you?" "Yes, Kurenai-san. There is he won't be able to accompany the rest of your team on today's mission because I need to borrow one of your genin for a while." "What's the matter?" Wondering what he would want with just a genin, she asked. "It is a matter involving INT that I have decided to take care of personally since Anko has the next 3 days off," Ibiki said, lifting his gaze from Naruto to briefly focus on Kurenai. He outranked her, so Kurenai had no choice but to accept him. "I understand, Ibiki-san, but I expect him ready for team duties tomorrow," Kurenai said, unsure of how to react. "Don't worry, we're just going to have a little talk," Ibiki said, smiling in a manner that was strikingly similar to his smile when he saw a new prisoner to play with. He said, "Strife-san, follow me so we can talk somewhere more private." The teenager nodded in agreement, and Ibiki put his hand on the boy's shoulder before using shunshin once more and bringing Naruto along. Kurenai looked at where Naruto had been sitting moments before and couldn't help but worry about her student and best friend's fiancé. Unfortunately, the mission they were given for the day was to catch Tora, and the poor cat was caught in record time when Tenten used her twin dragon technique, causing the cat to faint and nearly have a heart attack. Tora had been so scared that he had even jumped into his master's arms when they returned to the mission hall. Tenten had been such a ball of energy since the morning that even Guy told her to calm down before her flames of youth burned out. This is why we find Guy walking with Tenten back to her house after he had dismissed the rest of the team. "I'm glad your youthful flames are burning so brightly, Tenten, but what has changed to cause such a shift?" As though it were the most obvious thing in the world, she declared, "I'm moving in with my fiancé today, Guy-sensei." Since hardly anyone outside the council was aware of the recent engagement, Guy's enormous eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Fiancé? Who is the man who has captured the interest of Konoha's youngest Kunoichi, and when did you get engaged?" Even though she was eager to get home and finish moving in, she paused and gave Guy a genuinely happy smile. "He asked me on Saturday, and his name is Strife Naruto," she said. In addition to holding a seat on the council, he is the clan head. After a moment of staring at Tenten as she left, Guy slapped the side of his face to get his thoughts straight and hurried after her. "Can you tell me more about him? I'm really interested in how you fell in love with someone so elderly." As she walked on, Tenten shook her head and laughed, saying, "He's not that old. He is actually just a few months older than I am. He has a golden heart, is tall, well-built, and has hair the color of sunlight. After graduating from the academy, he was paired with Yuichi Kurenai, Aburame Shino, and Hyuga Hinata as Jonin-sensei on Team 8. "It sounds like this Naruto's flames of youth burn brightly," Guy said, shocked to learn that she was engaged to a 15-year-old clan head who had a seat on the council and had recently graduated from the academy. "You have to show him to me right away." "Hi, Guy-sensei." As they turned a corner, Tenten noticed multiple Naruto clones waiting for her. She quickly said goodbye to Guy before rushing over to them. "Anko-chan and I have been discussing hosting a housewarming party, and we intend to invite a number of people, so feel free to consider yourself invited." "Why are you all present?" Of the first person she encountered, she inquired. "We were sent by boss to assist you in moving." The clone smiled at her and said, "Your dad has a shop, and there are a few others inside helping him." Tenten began to jump up and down at the sound of this. "Is he also present?" In the hopes that her soon-to-be husband would be close, she asked. No. Morino Ibiki, a large, intimidating-looking man, wanted to speak with boss. He reportedly collaborates with Anko-chan, and he was somewhat concerned about her. Ibiki, like the head of Anbu Ibiki's INT division in Konoha? Having heard tales of the man who gave her nightmares, she spoke with concern in her voice. "Yes, that is him. He seemed to want to give boss the big brother talk because he views Anko-chan as a little sister." Tenten was about to run to Anbu headquarters when she felt arms encircle her waist from behind. "Have I mentioned that I adore the smell of your skin after you've been training, Ten-chan?" I'm afraid that her love is in the hands of a man who is known to be ignorant of the meaning of the word. She heard Naruto kiss her neck just before she felt a chill go down her spine. "I was concerned about you, Naruto-koi." As his teeth touched her skin, she let out a gasp. There was no reason for concern. Ibiki is genuinely frightening. But his only worry is for Anko, however. I'm relieved that he favors psychological torture over physical. He laughed as Tenten turned to examine him, saying, "He had me sweating like a pig at an Akamichi family reunion." Roshi's expression darkened as the kiss continued for a few minutes until he coughed loudly to get their attention. She sighed in relief after making sure he was unharmed and then pulled him into a deep kiss, not realizing her father had come outside just in time to witness her hands exploring Naruto's torso. Roshi gave Tenten a fatherly glare as he said, "It's good to know you two are happy to see each other, but there are a few things Naruto and I need to talk about." He was glad his daughter had found a boyfriend he approved of, but Tenten was still his little princess, regardless of the fact that she was a ninja with a year of experience and could pin a fly to the wall at 100 yards. After being cornered by Ibiki, Naruto sighed, figuring he'd have to have this conversation with Tenten's father. He kissed Tenten's forehead and went to Roshi, saying, "Why don't you take the clones to help you finish packing, and I'll be with you as soon as I can." As she watched them enter the house, she said, "Okay, Naruto Koi." After a moment, she collected the necessary clones and entered. Roshi, meanwhile, had led Naruto to his office, where he managed the shop's finances. "I won't mince words, Naruto Tenten is still my little girl, but I like you and it makes me happy to see how content she is with you as her father. I will tell you this even though I know you'll do everything in your power for her. Even the Aburame, Hyuga, and Inuzuka won't be able to find you if you ever hurt her. Do I express myself clearly?" His final glare was driven by a sense of paternal protectiveness. "I get it. Roshi, I would rather cut my arm off than allow her to suffer any harm. I will do everything in my power to assist her in realizing her dream of becoming a Kunoichi on par with Tsunade of the Sanin." "Good to hear," Roshi said, nodding and lowering the intensity of his glare. "Have the two of you discussed children yet? Until she is at least a Chunin, if not a Jonin. I hope you choose to wait. I have no immediate desire to become a grandfather." Since he had never considered having children, Naruto honestly ran a hand through his hair and said, "We haven't discussed having children yet, but I think it's safe to assume it will be a few years before that happens, although I'm not sure about Ten-chan. I'm not yet prepared to have children." "All right," Roshi sighed, thinking he was being silly because he knew Naruto well enough to know that he would make sure Tenten was well taken care of. "Go ahead and get Tenten situated," he said, adding, "I would really hate for Tenten to retire before she was ready." "You two must have had a busy day." He sat down at the desk and began organizing the papers he still hadn't finished. After a brief moment of observing Roshi, Naruto left Roshi to his work and went upstairs to check on Tenten. He could hear her giving commands to his clones as he approached her bedroom, so he stopped and leaned against the doorframe to watch her with a smile as the room rapidly cleared out and clones loaded with her belongings began leaving for her new home, with the remaining clones taking care of the last few things. He approached her from behind in an attempt to blend in. "I think Roshi would be satisfied with 4 grandchildren." Jumping, Tenten turned to Naruto and said, "Don't startle me like that." She nearly screamed before she blushed deeply as what he said finally registered in her brain. 4? Was that what he said? "No, he did say that he wanted us to wait before having children, and honestly I agree with him," Naruto said. Laughing as he embraced her, he leaned in and gave her a gentle kiss, saying, "I don't think either of us is ready to have kids yet, and I don't want you to have to give up your dream." She gave him a quick smile and slapped him on the arm after the kiss was over, saying, "Don't play with me like that." She looks around and notices that the clones have completed their task. "We ought to start now. We still need to decide what to have for supper, and I still don't know where the house is." "It's true, Ten-chan. And don't worry about dinner, I have already taken care of it," he said, extending his arm to her. "Let's go." When Tenten and Naruto reached what was once known as the Namikaze estate, she couldn't help but pause in wonder as she entered the gate. The estate was almost as large as the Inuzuka compound, with a 3-story house that was easily 20,000 square feet. The majority of the land was either gardens or training areas, with a few small orchards, and there were a few outlying buildings that had been used for research and storage. A huge series of seals surrounded the entire property, and on the buildings Tenten couldn't help but gape at the sight, her surprise evident on her face. How can someone like this be afforded? It must have been very expensive. After speaking with Saratobi, we decided that I should have the estate that my parents had purchased, and I only had to pay to have it cleaned, so it only cost a little more than an A-rank mission, he says, grinning at her response and putting an arm around her waist. "In any case, I couldn't have imagined that 2 such stunning women, you and Enko-chan, would share an apartment, could I?" They stood for a few minutes before going inside, and Tenten couldn't resist cuddling up to Naruto as warmth flooded her chest at his words. She knew he loved them very much because he was going to marry them, but it was comforting to know he would go to such lengths for them. "Ten-chan, why don't you settle in?" Before he left, he gave her a gentle peck on the cheek and smiled softly. "I need to check on dinner," he said, kissing her lightly on the lips and creating a shadow clone to assist her with anything she might need. A few hours later, the girls were seen coming down the stairs wearing dresses that were definitely sexy in the classy sense. They couldn't help but smile as they entered the dining room, which was decorated with candles and had a number of clones dressed as butlers waiting to serve them. They had only been seated for a short while when Naruto arrived, looking dashing in a formal black silk kimono, and he kissed each of them, remarking on how beautiful they looked as the clones served the 7-course meal that had been prepared for them. They engaged in small talk until the 5th course was served, at which point Enko mentioned that Kurenai had mentioned Ibiki was looking for Naruto earlier. He wanted to give me the big brother talk, and thought it was necessary to do it in one of the interrogation cells, and even got Inoichi to help him. He said, grimacing slightly, "Yeah, he found me too." He grinned as he turned to face Anko, saying, "Apparently he sees you as a little sister, Anko-chan. It never occurred to me that a man with his reputation could have such a tender heart." "Why am I not surprised?" Anko asked, laughing as he pictured Ibiki and Inoichi questioning Naruto for several hours. "The fact that they didn't do it in the meat locker suggests that they like you." After hearing some terrifying tales about Anko's co-workers, Tenten appeared a little alarmed. "What did they do, Naruto-koi?" "After meeting Anko, I've learned that some of the rumors I've heard about them aren't entirely accurate." "Yes, Ten-chan, they're true. Simply put, those rumors originate from their victims, and few people get to know the person who committed the crime. You must also acknowledge that there is some merit to INT's reputation. How many people are aware, after all, that Anko is more than just the crazy snake lady?" With an unhappy grunt, Anko crossed her arms and pouted, saying, "I like the reputation I have, thank you very much." Anko stuck her tongue out at them after Naruto and Tenten laughed at the display. They then continued eating and remained at the table talking long after they had finished. As it was getting close to midnight, Naruto got up and stretched while yawning. Naruto cleared his glasses off the table and said, "Today was a long day, and I'm going to head to bed." When he entered the kitchen, Tenten and Anko exchanged a glance before they both grinned and went upstairs to begin their earlier plan. Naruto assumed the girls were also exhausted and had gone to bed. When he returned to find the dining room empty, he hurried up to his room, undressed, and quickly showered, going out of the bathroom without anything on except the towel he was using to dry his hair. It wasn't until he heard one of them speak that he realized the girls were present. "I refer to that as dessert, Tenten, don't you agree?" Out of instinct, Naruto grabbed the towel off his head to cover himself and froze in shock at what he saw. Both of his fiancées were fully nude, their hair falling down to caress each other, and they both grinned at his astonished expression, which quickly changed to matching smirks as his body's reaction revealed that he liked the sight. Waking up slowly, he first noticed the sun streaming through the window, which was quickly followed by the feel of his hand holding a breast. Lifting up with the treasure still in his hand, he noticed that Anko rolled off of him and was on the outside of a tendon sandwich with her back facing him. Smiling at the beautiful and undoubtedly sexy scene, he carefully moved from the bed and got dressed to make breakfast for the three of them. Only half paying attention to the omelets, bacon, and toast he was preparing, his thoughts went back to last night. Smiling and a little sore in certain areas, he wondered about the women sleeping upstairs. How did I get so lucky to end up with women like them? If even 1/4 of what happened was from love, I wonder how they will act when we finally have kids. At that thought, he began to envision years from now with a brown hair boy fencing with Tenten, and a purple-haired boy using snakes to scare his younger sister. Between his thoughts and the rest of his focus on breakfast, he failed to notice another presence arrive behind him, and was completely surprised by someone shouting his name. With his brain on shutdown, he was unable to catch Yuffie as she leapt on him, and he landed hard on his back with the woman he never imagined seeing again on top of him. Dazed from the impact of his head hitting the hardwood floor, he blinked several times to get the stars out of his eyes widened in shock, and his mouth gaped open. "Naru-kun? Are you okay?" With a worried expression on her face, Yuffie spoke from her straddling position. Still in shock and not believing this was real, Naruto looked up at Yuffie and slowly raised a shackling hand to her face, gently caressing her tear-streaked face. His mind was focused on his current predicament, not even taking into account the women who still carried the scars from the previous night. Tenten and Anko were rudely awakened by a loud impact and a sudden shout, so they hurried down the stairs and out of bed without even covering their naked, love-stained bodies. "Naruto-kun. Koi Naruto." Concern swiftly gave way to righteous rage as they yelled and leapt from the second-story landing to the first floor, running into the kitchen before stopping dead in their tracks when they noticed a brunette with short hair who appeared to be attempting to make out with their man. "Who are you, anyway?" Anko screamed, clenching her fist in preparation for an assault. "You bitch, get off my man." Tenten shouted as she slipped into the stance for the taijutsu she had studied under Maeda Guy, the sensei of her team. Yuffie glared at Naruto before getting to her feet, her eyes narrowing as she saw two nude women poised to attack her. "My name is Kasaragi Yuffie," she said, "the woman who carried his son while I was pregnant." As Naruto lay on the floor with his back to the sink, staring at Yuffie in stunned shock, the words, "His son, my womb," kept repeating in his mind. He had been about to stand up when he heard those words, but his legs gave out and he fell backward. "A son. I have a son," he whispered, and only because of the utter silence that followed Yuffie's statement could the women hear him. When Yuffie heard the whisper, she broke off her stare to look at Naruto, and her face softened as she saw the look on his face. She spoke softly as she knelt beside him and slowly looked him in the eyes. As unshed tears began to well up in her eyes, she put her hands gently on Naruto's cheek and said, "Yes, Naruto, I carried our son inside me." As the memories flashed before her eyes, Yuffie had to swallow hard at the emotion she felt and hang her head in shame. "I failed you. I lost him. I wasn't strong enough. I was so selfish when you disappeared that I miscarried less than a month after you left. He died because of me." The scene in front of Tenten and Anko broke their hearts. Both of them stood there with distressed expressions and a protective hand over their stomachs, indicating that they had considered carrying Naruto's children. They exchanged glances for a moment before approaching the two and embracing them. This seemed to be a sign that when they did, Naruto put his arms around the three women and sobbed uncontrollably as he felt a piece of his dream of starting a family die inside of him. For more than an hour, they remained in this position for a long time, each of them sharing and sobbing over the suffering they were experiencing. Anko tapped Tenten's arm and motioned for her to follow after the sobbing had ceased, and Yuffie and Naruto were holding each other tightly. Tenten followed Anko out of the kitchen after giving a nod and carefully removing herself so as not to disturb the two. She looked back at the two with concern and whispered, "What is it, Anko?" Sharing the younger woman's worry for their fiancé and his first love, Anko inhaled deeply. "I don't want to leave them alone, but they should talk without us there, and we really need to get cleaned up." For the first time since hearing the shout, Tenten looked closely at Anko and then at herself. She blushed as deeply as Hinata before she passed out. She said, suddenly conscious of the pain and other reminders of last night, "I hadn't even noticed. We should take our time, and I think we need to discuss this ourselves." Anko paused to gaze at Yuffie and Naruto, then nodded her head and sighed. "Yeah, and I'll bet a month's worth of dango that our vacation isn't going to go anything like what either of us had wanted. I don't want to leave them alone too long. However, why don't you join me in the bath? That way we can talk more, and get back here sooner." Tenten nodded her head after turning to face them. "Okay," she said, indicating that Anko should take the lead. Yuffie was sitting at the table drinking tea when the two women returned to the kitchen 45 minutes after they had just finished washing and dressing until Anko finally broke the silence. Everyone was quiet. "Why don't we introduce ourselves since we didn't get a chance to earlier? I am Mitarashi Anko Tokubetsu Jonin of Konoha, and fiancé of Strife Naruto. I am Hisagia Tenten Genin of Konoha, and fiancé of Strife Naruto." For a long moment, Yuffie gazed at them, recalling the condition in which she had first seen them. "I am Kasaragi Yuffie. I am what you would call a Jonin of Wutai, and it appears there is a lot we need to talk about." As she sipped her tea, Yuffie took a few moments to examine the two women across from her. She finally started discussing how she had met Naruto, their relationship, the time he had spent on Gaia, and what he had shared with her about his early years in the Kyuubi. She was taken aback by their response when she revealed how the village had treated him, but she concealed it and carried on speaking while keeping a closer eye on them. Their initial shock was soon followed by a growing sense of rage, anguish over Naruto's ordeal, and hurt that he didn't trust them enough. With this, she poured more tea after finishing her story and waited in silence to hear their thoughts. Tenten was surprisingly the first to speak up, and she was not pleased at all. Her fists were clenched, and she was shaking with rage at what her beloved had experienced as a child and the fact that he felt he had to conceal it from those he loved. "I'll kill them. How dare they treat a child like that just because a demon was sealed in him?" she said. The intensity of the words shocked Anko, who grinned pitifully that it had taken everything to get someone to treat him like a human. Anko had to raise her hands defensively as she sensed rising ki coming from the others. They are scared fools who were so blinded by the loss of their families, and anger at the Kyuubi they couldn't see the forest for the trees. Don't get me wrong here, I am not defending them. Think about it though, put yourselves in their shoes. The Kyuubi ate or simply obliterated the ninja that fought against it, and some parts of Konoha there were almost no bodies to bury. They couldn't really get any closure and let their loss hold sway over their lives. Knowing that what she was going to say could land her in hot water with the Hokage, Anko took a moment to gather her thoughts before continuing. What I am about to say is supposed to be kept secret, and if the Hokage finds out I could get into some serious trouble. Before I joined the I&T division of Anbu, I was one of the Anbu assigned to protect Uzumaki before he joined the academy. I stopped many from getting their hands on him, and oftentimes wished I could have taken care of him myself, but the council wouldn't let anyone do that. Some wanted to keep him weak, others wanted him dead, some wanted to turn him into a living weapon, while the rest were simply indifferent. All in all, there were only a few that treated him like he was a normal child. Even with all that he went through, he would always bounce back with a smile. The Hokage, Anko, fell silent with a thoughtful look as it suddenly occurred to her. The Hokage must know that Strife is Uzumaki, why else would he have supported him so much since he came back? When Tenten heard this, he looked at Anko with curiosity. What do you mean, Anko? The Hokage looks at Naruto-kun like a grandson, and if you think about the story that he's been using, it makes sense. He's been using the cover story since he got out of the hospital, and the Hokage spent as much time as he could there after Naruto-kun woke up. I bet the cover story was his idea. As the women considered this, they fell silent, but Tenten broke the ice. Since it seems like the Hokage knows more about our man than we do, I think we need to have a talk with him. Naruto was jolted out of his emotional reunion by an alarm he had set earlier while the girls were getting clean. He got to his feet slowly and went to the counter where the alarm was to turn it off. Even though he was regarded as a newly minted genin, he still had ninja duties to fulfill. Despite his mind being in disarray from the situation, he turned and started to go upstairs to get dressed, but paused at the kitchen door. I'm sorry, Yuffie, but I have to get ready and leave. I have a team meeting at 8. I should be back around mid-afternoon. I will understand if you choose not to stay. Since he was already running late, he hurriedly got dressed, left the house in 15 minutes, and took to the rooftops. He discovered that Kurenai was the only person who had yet to arrive. When he landed a few minutes later in the clearing where his team used to gather, he approached her and tried to hide his feelings by grinning as he greeted her. Ohio, Kurenai-chan. Kurenai smiled, interpreting the discoloration around his eyes as a result of Anko keeping him up all night rather than the emotional ordeal he had just gone through. Ohio, Naruto-kun, I'm surprised to see you this morning. I thought that Anko wouldn't let you out until tomorrow. With a distracted tone, he asked whether it would be wise to leave the three alone and said, she probably wouldn't have if she and Tenten weren't otherwise occupied. At this, Kurenai arched an eyebrow and, realizing he was preoccupied, made up his mind. She said, somewhat disappointed that she would have to shorten her time with him, and gave herself a mental slap for it. It seems you won't be in the right frame of mind for team training today, so we'll just get a mission when the others arrive, and call it a day after lunch. Reluctant to return to the house until he had had time to reflect, Naruto asked, are you sure about this? She blushed slightly as she thought about Naruto on top of her. Yes, I am. Naruto-kun, I can tell you are tired and distracted. It's not really surprising since I would have done the same in Anko's place. As she noticed Shino and Hinata coming toward her, she tried to think of something to say and thanked Kami. She waved to them and said, Ohio, Shino, and Hinata. Naruto remained as stoic as ever after Shino gave her a nod. Hinata, on the other hand, waved back with a smile. Ohio, Kurenai-sensei, Naruto-san. She motioned for them to follow her as she turned to head to the mission hall, which was on the first floor of the Hokage Tower. Since Naruto-kun is tired from clan business, and has a lot more to handle, we will be having a short day today. We'll skip training this morning so we can get a mission done before lunch. This will also give you more free time to either train in your clan's jutsu or just relax. When they finally reached the mission hall, they were taken aback to see Iruka and the Hokage distributing missions. Kurenai greeted Sarutobi as he approached the desk in a diamond shape. Naruto at the back, Hinata to the left, and Shino to the right. She bowed to the elderly man and said, Ohio, Hokage-sama, I am surprised to see you handing out missions so early. Leaning back and taking a long drag from his pipe, he glanced over her team and laughed lightly. I thought I'd take personal interest this morning to see how our new genin are holding up. I have to say that your team looks good. Kurenai, I have to admit I was a little worried with you being a rookie jonin. She bowed deeply to conceal her faint blush at the compliment, saying, thank you, Hokage-sama. But these genin are greatly above average for this graduating class. With their brains and talent, my job is very easy. What the devil? She thought to herself. I seem to be blushing at the drop of a hat lately? Iruka, who had been silently observing the scene, had to quickly look away when he began to get a nosebleed from Kurenai's cleavage display. When she bowed, he spoke in a positive tone while forcing a cough to conceal wiping his nose. He pointed to the 2-foot stack on the desk and said, I assume your team is here for a mission, Kurenai-san? We have a lot to pick from since most genin teams haven't shown up yet. After closely examining Naruto's face, Sarutobi remarked, actually I have a specific mission in mind for this team. Iruka, It's one that I know is well within their capabilities. If Kurenai will accept it, what do you? The doors suddenly slammed open as a gruff-looking group entered. Sakura appeared a little embarrassed, Kiba and Sasuke were rugged-looking, and Kakashi was as usual buried in his orange book. Kiba snarled, visibly enraged at the final Uchiha, "Next time you insult Akamaru I will rip off your teme balls, Uke-chan." Uchiha Sasuke, who was filthy and scratched up, said mockingly, "HN like you could, Dobi you'd probably be too busy licking them if I let you." Iruka applied the notorious, big head jutsu, when she finally had enough, her face growing grimmer with every word. Straightening his jacket, he glared at them and said, "Enough, shut up and behave yourselves." Before taking a seat, even though they were no longer academy students, he didn't seem proud that it still functioned, saying, "You are in the presence of the Hokage, and you should act like it." Sarutobi merely looked at Team 7 and took another drag from his pipe after saying, "Thank you, Iruka. You are quite right. Now, as I was saying, do you think your team is ready for a C-rank escort mission, Kurenai?" Kurenai was shocked to learn that her team had only completed 6 D ranks, whereas a C rank typically required 30 to 40. She was a little concerned that having a clan head and 2 clan heirs on her team would cause problems, so she said, "I believe they are, but I honestly can't say. Are you sure about this, sir? I know Naruto is powerful, but my team is meant for tracking and information gathering." Kiba was still furious and yelled, "What? Why do they get a C rank already when we're stuck with D ranks?" For once, Sasuke concurred with Kiba with a sneer full of pride that would have made Napoleon proud. He declared, "I demand a C rank mission. If they are ready for one, then as the last Uchiha I certainly am as well." Sakura, a fangirl with pink hair, yelled, "Yeah, no one is better than Sasuke-kun." Iruka started to scold the rambunctious genin, but Sarutobi stopped him with a hand gesture. He picked up a scroll and held it out to Kurenai to highlight his point. Team 7 has not earned the right to do C-rank missions yet, while Team 8 has. The details of the mission are on the scroll. You will meet the client in 1 hour at the East Gate. His name is Tazuna, a bridge builder. Sakura and Sasuke had hurried out of the mission hall as Kurenai bowed and accepted the scroll. Kurenai turned to her team after thanking the Hokage. She said all business and then used Shunshin to get her own gear. "You heard Hokage-sama, get your gear, and meet up at the East Gate in 1 hour. Do not let the faith he has shown in us go to waste." When Sarutobi's advisors entered and stood in front of his desk 2 hours later, he was ready to take a lunch break. He took his time completing the paperwork he was working on before placing it in the outbox because he wasn't really in the mood to deal with them. With only a hint of annoyance visible, he said, "Can this wait? I was about to get something to eat." Before he spoke, Homura pushed up his glasses. "It has come to our attention that you gave a C-rank escort mission to a team of rookie genin, and refused to give Uchiha-san's Team 1 as well. We want to know why, since it is obvious that out of the teams that graduated this year Team 7 is the best, having both Uchiha-san as well as Kakashi." Kaharu, who was right behind him, shared her thoughts. "It makes no sense, especially considering that Kakashi is an elite jonin, and Uchiha-san graduated as Rookie of the Year. I also fail to understand why Recon Team was given this mission instead of a direct assault team. Surely Team 7 is much more qualified for it than Team 8 inches." Sighing, Sarutobi said, "Why must I put up with this shit?" Gazing at his former teammates, he asked himself, "I chose Team 8 over Team 7 because Team 8 would be able to sense attackers, and prepare for it. Team 7 would be far less prepared, and could possibly lose the client in the first attack. Also Team 8 works far better as a group than Team 7 inches." When Kaharu and Homura heard this, they looked at each other. They were ardent supporters of Uchiha, but they also understood that he was correct. That may be true, but having our strongest rookie team perform this mission would send a message to the other villages that even with the massacre we are still strong enough to send out the last loyal Uchiha on a mission outside the country. To do otherwise would show our enemies that we are afraid of losing the Sharingan. As Sarutobi considered this, he pinched his nose. He sighed deeply and made a decision he hoped he wouldn't regret, but he wasn't in the mood to miss lunch arguing about the Uchiha. "I'm hungry and have to deal with all this paperwork, let alone all the crap from the council as it is, without having to deal with Uchiha fanatics on top of it." Sarutobi gestured for one of the Anbu to appear, saying, "Fine, whatever." He looked at the senior advisors after the Anbu had bowed and vanished. "Tell Kakashi to get his team ready there to act as backup for Team 8 on their escort mission to Nami no Kuni. Now if there isn't anything else, I'm going to get something to eat." Hinata, who had been periodically turning her Byakugan on and off to monitor the surroundings, had become aware of Naruto's mood and was becoming more and more interested and concerned because it had only gotten worse since they had left yesterday morning. Naruto took rear guard, so she slowed down to return to his position. As she did, She noticed that Shino's bugs were expanding to cover the space she had left behind. Kurenai, who was walking with Tazuna, was also aware of this. Unsure of how to bring up the topic, she used the time to think and do a thorough survey of the area. She didn't say anything for several minutes. With a hint of her younger self showing, Hinata said, Anyo, Naruto-san, is something wrong? Keeping up with the group, Naruto gazed at her for a moment before letting out a sigh and uncrossing his arms. To be honest, I'm not sure if this mission could have come at a worse time or if it is gift from Kami-sama. This perplexed Hinata because they were the first to receive a C-rank mission, which is never given to a new genin team. What do you mean, Naruto-san? He combed his hair while glancing at the other members of his team, as if evaluating each one individually. As he finally turned to face Hinata, he saw that her shoulders drooped as she felt like she was being put on a scale. After a long moment, he spoke softly. He looked around as if anticipating an ambush, then back at her. When I was making breakfast for Ten-chan and Anko-chan this morning, there was an unexpected surprise, I guess you could say. You know of our engagement, correct? Inquiring as to whether he was having issues with one of them, she said, Hi, as Era's father always discusses council meetings with me as part of my political education, and he told me about it after dinner that night. Naruto nodded upon hearing this, anticipating such a response from one of the most powerful clans in Konoha. He took a breath and said, What you probably don't know is that before I returned to Konoha I was involved with a woman that I had every intention of marrying one day. He saw her eyes widen as he said this. Her name is Kasaragi Yuffie. We met several years ago, and she became a sensei of mine. Along with a few others, eventually we fell in love. When we found out I would have to return here at a certain point, we took every chance we had to spend time together. As the time of my departure neared, we only grew closer together, and I realized that if I could I would spend the rest of my life with her. Naruto's expression changed to one of many emotions, and he abruptly fell silent when Hinata saw the love, pain, hope, despair, anger, and other emotions she couldn't quite place in his face. She felt sorry for him because she knew that something terrible had happened to keep them apart. In order to give him time to collect himself and wonder what Yuffie had to do with his mood, Hinata decided to keep quiet and looked around once more. When the time for me to return came, it was unexpected. I was returning from guarding a merchant to a nearby town, and did not have a chance to do anything about it, and awoke in Konoha. I do not know what happened between now and when I was forced to return, not knowing if she was alive or dead, hated me for leaving, or even if I would ever be able to see her again this side of the afterlife. This morning I found out that not only was she alive, but that she was in Konoha as well. I also found out she was pregnant when I left. The final word was spoken with a sorrowful voice, barely audible as he looked up the heavens. Hinata heard it clearly despite the fact that it was spoken so softly, and she genuinely felt sorry for the man she believed to be her beloved Uzumaki's brother. She was able to comprehend his emotional confusion as her mind processed the information. As her heiress training kicked in, her thoughts turned to the consequences this would have on him forming a clan. Even as her heart ached for him, as soon as she saw a tear or two on his face, her train of thought was interrupted, and her concern for him only grew after he said something more. She showed up while I was making breakfast, tackling me in a hug, and the noise brought Ten-chan and Anko-chan downstairs. I can only guess that they were worried about an intruder, because they were both still in the same condition as when we fell asleep after making love. When Hinata realized what he had left unsaid, her eyes widened and she gasped aloud, blushing. Kurenai raised an eyebrow in curiosity after hearing the gasp and turning to face them. She decided it could wait until they set up camp after observing them continuing to speak in low voices to avoid being overheard, and she hoped it wouldn't interfere with the mission. She wanted to hold him and ask him what was wrong, but she knew the mission came first. She also felt a twinge of jealousy, but it was quickly smothered by the realization that she wasn't the person he was confiding in. With a sigh, she returned to her responsibilities as mission leader and Jonin sensei, pondering whether or not her previous choices were wise. During Kurenai's emotional struggle, Naruto resumed his speech while maintaining a detached gaze. Despite his best efforts, the pain he was feeling was evident in his voice as he said, "It was after they arrived that I found out she had been carrying my son." Hinata was confused until she heard what he had to say. After I left, she nearly had a breakdown, and because of the stress that put on her body, she miscarried. When it was revealed that her beloved blonde had passed away, Hinata, who had grown a lot since making that vow, was still a kind and gentle girl at heart. She put her hand to her mouth while crying as she heard the pain in his words. She gasped, unable to raise her voice above a whisper. "Oh, Naruto-san." To avoid crying, Naruto took a deep breath and tightly closed his eyes. When he finally turned to face Hinata, the light from the fading sun reflected in his eyes, which were wet with unshed tears and appeared to be bleeding. He said in such a sorrowful tone, "Because of me our son is dead." Hinata, who was self-loathing, was unable to look him in the eye and sobbed aloud for his son's passing. Kurenai was intrigued and a little worried about what they had been discussing. After hearing this, she decided to set up camp a little early after looking at the map and determining the sun's position. With enough volume to be heard, she declared, "We'll make camp here tonight." Kurenai made a "follow me" gesture as she made her way toward the trees away from the camp setup area. "We will reach the boat early tomorrow, and we should be rested in case something happens. Shino, you and Tazuna will set up camp. Naruto, I want you to get some firewood, and if you find a source of water, get enough for tonight. And tomorrow, Hinata, come with me." Kurenai turned to Hinata with a worried expression on her face. Once they had traveled far enough, she gently inquired, "What happened, Hinata?" in an attempt to elicit a confession from the girl. With a sigh, Hinata sat with her back against a tree and looked back in the direction they had come. "I'm not sure if I should tell you, Kurenai-sensei. I don't want my teammates to think they can't trust me." Kurenai put a hand on Hinata's shoulder while kneeling in front of her. "I understand how you feel, Hinata, but as your Jonin-sensei I need to know what is going on with my team, especially if it could compromise our mission." After a moment of conflicted glances at Kurenai, Hinata turned back to the camp and answered in a voice that was too low to be heard. She took a deep breath and braced herself, saying, "Naruto-san has been acting uncomfortable since we left Konoha, and it only got worse, so I asked him about it." She asked, "Do you know about his past?" and received a small nod in response. Wondering what the girl had heard that she hadn't, she responded, "I know a little. He isn't exactly forthcoming about it. I do know he was trained outside the elemental countries, and was seeing someone before he came to Konoha." With a nod, Hinata turned on her Byakugan for a moment to ensure that no one could hear them. Hinata observed Kurenai's eyes widen at the potential meaning of the statement. "Apparently she arrived in Konoha, and showed up at Naruto-san's house the morning we left." Oh shish tea. It makes sense why Naruto is upset, but wait, what if she had arrived prior to the team meeting? Oh fuck. If Anko did what she told me she was going to do, that can't be good at all. Kurenai's eyes widened, but that was the only sign of what was going through her mind. Hinata observed Kurenai lean back and release a deep breath upon hearing this. "That's not all. He told me that she found out she was pregnant after he came to Konoha." As her sensei jerked her head up in surprise, Hinata nodded solemnly. "From what he says, she was very distraught about it, and miscarried their son. He blames himself for it too. I think you should talk with him, Kurenai-sensei. I'm worried about him." Although Hinata appeared to be displaying more concern than just a teammate, Kurenai could see that she was worried about her teammate and was genuinely concerned about him as well. "Do you like him, Hinata?" The words caused the girl to startle with a strong emphasis on the word. She said, "No, he is a teammate, and his brother." Kurenai asked curiously, "His?" When Hinata thought of the blonde she had fallen in love with years before, she blushed a little. "Uzumaki Naruto Strife-san is his twin brother." Although Kurenai was not shocked to hear this, he chose to act foolish in order to hear Hinata's response. She brushed off her knees and got up, dismissing the thought for later. Kurenai paused, wondering why they shared a first name. "I think it's time we got back to Camp 1. We'll talk to Naruto later." Kurenai was unaware that Hinata had heard her, but she had given voice to the thought. "I asked Naruto-san about it after our first team meeting. He told me that he chose to take his brother's name after finding out about his life and subsequent death." Given that it was a S-class village secret, Kurenai couldn't help but wonder where he got the information and became determined to learn how much he knew. When their conversation was over, she motioned for Hinata to follow her as she began to walk back to camp. Despite her discipline as a Jonin, Kurenai's mind was a mess the entire way back. To her annoyance, she thought about everything from how Naruto's emotional state would affect the mission to her fantasies about carrying his child. In a flash, Kurenai chastised herself for allowing her emotions to control her and made the decision to wait to speak to Naruto until she had a chance to gather her thoughts as they returned to camp for the sake of Kami. "I am a Jonin," she shouted to herself. After a quick breakfast the following morning, the group broke camp when Shino's bugs warned him of approaching campers. He turned to face the direction from which the newcomers would arrive and said stoically, "There are 4 people incoming, Kurenai-sensei." As soon as he said this, Hinata and Kurenai hurried to cover Tazuna, and Naruto pulled out his Zanbato, ready to strike if necessary. Hinata activated her Byakugan, scanning for them. After positioning herself, she calmed down after a short while and called her teammates. She shifted out of her Juken stance and said, "It's okay, Kurenai-sensei. It's Sasuke, Kiba, and Sakura with their sensei." The others followed suit. After a few minutes, Team 7 did indeed descend from the trees and enter the camp. Kurenai crossed her arms as she approached Kakashi and stopped 10 feet in front of him. She was upset because she hadn't slept well because of her thoughts from the previous night and her growing interest in Naruto. "What's the deal, Kakashi?" I doubt there was another mission in this area, and even if there was, I highly doubt Hokage-sama would let your team take it. The white-haired Jonin grinned and raised his hands defensively. Calm down, Kurenai. We are here under orders from the Hokage to act as your backup. Kurenai was undoubtedly upset to hear this since it implied that there was a problem or that she and her team were not trusted by the higher authorities. She glared at Kakashi before averting her gaze to Tazuna, demonstrating that a woman who is angry is never a good thing. As any man knows, she arched an eyebrow at his apprehensive demeanor upon witnessing his response to Team 7's arrival approaching the bridge builder. She said harshly, "Is there something you want to tell us, Tazuna-san?" Sweating heavily, Tazuna's eyes instinctively searched for a way out, even though he knew it was impossible. Why would you think that? Heh, he said, reaching for his jug of sake in apparent distress. By this time, everyone was wary, and they all surrounded the elderly man to show it. As Sasuke fingered a kunai, Akamaru went so far as to growl from atop Kiba's head. Taking note of this, Tazuna looked around at the others before locking eyes with Naruto. Tazuna noticed that the younger man's eyes seemed to glow an eerie green, making him feel like a rabbit staring at a wolf, and that as their eyes met, the perspiration seemed to freeze on his face unconsciously. He took a step backward until a tree greeted him, separating him from the seemingly mesmerizing stare. After swallowing hard, he concluded that telling the ninja the truth would be best for him. He held his hands up in an attempt to appease the lethal group surrounding him, saying, "No need to get aggressive, okay? I had no other choice, please let me explain." Kurenai turned to face her team after glancing at Kakashi, who simply shrugged and grinned without offering any assistance. With a sigh, she crossed her arms and legs and sat down on a log, glaring at Tazuna. She reflected, "This had better be good. Depending on what you say, we may have to deem your contract null and void." Wonderful. Simply wonderful. I can't stop fantasizing about my best friend's fiancé, and now this. Tazuna spent 30 minutes explaining Gato, Kaiza, Wave's struggles, and his aspirations for the bridge he was constructing. Kurenai turned to Kakashi after hearing his story to get his thoughts on nullifying the contract. Concerned about her genin, she said, "What do you think, Kakashi? This is definitely not a C-rank mission. More like a B or an A, especially if Gato has hired any shinobi." Before responding, Kakashi evaluated each of the 6 recently graduated ninja. "This would be a good chance for our teams to get some wet work experience, not to mention this is the exact kind of mission that would let us know if any of them aren't cut out for this line of work. On the other hand, they're fresh from the academy. We have 2 Jonin and 6 Genin. We know that as high-ranking clan members they're already near Chunin level in combat, but we do have a couple wildcards. I know Sasuke and Kiba could handle themselves, but what about your team?" As instructed by Sarutobi, she grudgingly said, "Hinata and Shino are as you'd expect, being heirs Naruto. Well, let's just say that I don't know if I could defeat him in combat." Kakashi was shocked by her statement and gave Naruto a close inspection. He saw at once the easy yet alert position he was in, and the way his gaze swept the room, given that those were behaviors that only experience could elicit. Kakashi was taken aback by this and pondered the identity of this enigmatic teenager. Curious to hear the boy with the Zanbato's opinion, he said, "We shouldn't have any issues with this mission, but why don't we see what our genin have to say about it?" Kurenai paused to consider this. While glancing at her team, she stood up and called attention to herself before speaking to the teenagers, saying, "I don't like this, but I agree that this would be a good experience for them. Kakashi and I have discussed this, and would like your opinions before we make our official decision. What do you want to do about this?" she said as she turned to Shino. Before he spoke, the insect user adjusted his glasses. "We would be well justified to void our contract via the false pretenses clause and head back to Konoha right now. However, if we do not handle the situation now, Gato may grow into a much larger issue, which would do no good for Konoha, as it would become public knowledge we ended the contract prematurely." Pulling a lock of hair behind her ear, Hinata said, "I agree, Kurenai-sensei. We cannot leave the people of Wave to Gato's non-existent mercy. I vote to continue the mission and eliminate Gato." Kiba, who is always up for a fight, offered his opinion. He exclaimed, "Yeah, let's kick his ass," and his K9 companion barked in response. Ever the moody emo, Sasuke just said what he always says, "HN." As president of the Sasuke Uchiha fan club, Sakura reacted promptly, as she usually does. She turned to face the duck-butt-headed boy and exclaimed, "What do we have to worry about? Sasuke-kun is the best ninja in the world." Kurenai turned to see the one person who had remained silent so far, and he was staring at Tazuna with such intensity that the old man was perspiring. She asked, "What do you think, Naruto-kun?" Which made Naruto turn to face her and Kakashi raise an eyebrow at the way she pronounced his name. As much as I want to cut our losses since he chose to endanger our lives by lying instead of approaching the Hokage with his plea, I have to agree with everyone else. I say we go on with the mission as long as it is amended to taking out Gato as well. We can't let people like him have their way, and like Shino said, this could be a good political opportunity. Kurenai looked at Tazuna and then raised an eyebrow at Kakashi. It seems to be unanimous since your team was sent as backup. That puts me in charge as a more experienced Jonin. I would like your input, but for any decisions about anything besides your own team you will have to get my approval first. Kurenai received a smile from Kakashi's eye as he acknowledged the chain of command. No problem, Kurenai, this is your mission after all. Good, this mission is unbalanced as it is. She turned to the other members of the group and spoke authoritatively. We will continue the mission, and eliminate Gato, Kiba and Naruto. You have point. Hinata, you guard Tazuna with Sakura. Sasuke, you take the left side. Shino, you take the right side with your bugs spread out. Kakashi and I will take the rear. These are your assigned positions until we get to Tazuna's house. Hinata, I want your Byakugan active every 30 seconds until we are on the boat and active as much as possible after we land. Shino, I want your bugs to scout the area ahead. Kiba, keep your nose and ears sharp. Remember, our main priority right now is to get Tazuna safely to his home. Assume formation. As they arrived at the water, everything had gone smoothly for them. One of Tazuna's friends provided them with a boat. Sadly, this was short-lived. As soon as they landed in Wave, they were able to see some of the men Gato had available to him. 20 armed mercenaries, bandits, wannabe samurai, and hired thugs blocked their way as they were making their way to Tazuna's house along a path that led outside the village. Smiling, the group leader stepped forward and spoke to the ninja. As he scowled at Kurenai, he said, "Give up the old man, and we might let you live after we have our fun with the girls." He spoke with the haughtiness that only those who ridicule those who are weaker than them possess. Kakashi took the stage on behalf of the group. Sorry, but we can't do that. It would be bad for our reputation. The haughty man lifted a fist above his head and sneered at the ninja. He dropped his hand and sent his forces into attack, saying, "Kill them all, but bring the red-eyed woman to me." The Konoha ninja had not been idle during this time. During their preparations, they all complied with Kurenai's hand signals for commands. Shino spread his bugs out. Kiba prepared a pill to use his family's beast clone jutsu. Sasuke prepared to cast a fire jutsu. Sakura and Hinata edged closer to Tazuna, and Naruto pulled out his sword one-handed and collected the necessary chakra for his plan. Naruto yelled out and released the chakra as soon as the enemy began to move. Quakera was a shout that caused the ground in the middle of the enemy to explode within 10 yards, sending stone and earth spikes piercing through them. Following Naruto's lead, Kiba began by using his clan's notorious Getsuga to eliminate 2 opponents, followed closely by Kakashi, who dealt damage with a kunai before yelling. Sasuke swiftly went over the hand signals to ensure he wasn't out. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. A number of the mercs were eliminated when the fireball swiftly accelerated and exploded to the left of Naruto's attack. 12 of the enemy were killed in the initial attacks, leaving 8 in the leader. Naruto, Kiba, and Kakashi hurried the enemy after the attacks, leaving the rest of the group in the diamond formation as instructed. Regretfully, Sasuke also hurried them, leaving the left side exposed. Everyone was concentrating on the enemy in front of them when a group of 5 mercs appeared on the roadside and attacked the flank that Sasuke had so kindly left open. Kurenai moved to intercept them, but Hinata did not notice them until they started the attack because she had not yet activated her Byakugan. She used Shunshin to put herself between the girl and the assailants after shouting, "Sakura," to get the girl's attention. Too late. Kurenai managed to block the attack, but it cost her a sword gash along her side. She winced in agony, but she swiftly killed the man because she was a Jonin. After briefly freezing, Hinata swiftly launched an offensive using Jukin, dispatching another of the hired thugs with an 8-hit combo that began on the man's arm and ended with a fully powered blow to the heart, killing him as he approached Tazuna. Shino, who was on the other side, sent his bugs in a swarm at the 3 remaining attackers while closely monitoring the area in case of another ambush. Sakura, meanwhile, stood trembling and clutched her kunai sweatily, unable to comprehend the carnage taking place in front of her. Like everyone else, she had received training at the academy and had heard tales of some of the missions, but what she was witnessing was the truth. It wasn't a heroic struggle out of a fairy tale, it was murder, heinous, bloody murder. Like someone who witnesses a horrific car accident, she couldn't take her eyes off the enemy as Kiba, Sasuke, Kakashi, and Naruto tore into it. She didn't even respond to Kurenai's yell or the enemy to the side because she was so absorbed in the action. The mercs were unable to keep up with the trained ninja's rushing attack, and by the time Kurenai's shout was heard, the 9 that were left had rapidly reduced to 3. After severing a man from hip to shoulder, Naruto saw Kurenai being cut open and fled, leaving the others to complete the task. He silently inflicted haste on himself, which doubled his speed, and then slammed into the other 3 ambushers, sending one of their heads flying. His unexpected arrival knocked the attackers off balance, causing Kurenai and Hinata to pause before they knew it. The final 2 were cleaved in 2 just below their ribs. He glanced back and saw Sasuke, Kiba, and Kakashi walking back, all of them looking fine except for their bloody appearance. He laid his sword on his back and hurried to Kurenai since there was no longer any need to fight. He helped her to the ground and said, "Lay down, Kurenai-chan, and I'll check your wound." Light green chakra started to cover his hands as he carefully examined the wound. Reassuringly, he covered the wound with his hands, applying regen to help with the blood loss and cure to finish the healing process. "It's not too bad, so I'll have this healed in a moment." The wound healed completely in a matter of minutes, leaving only a very thin, pale line to indicate its presence. Naruto, who loved her as a friend, said with little humor, "Kurenai-chan, please try to be more careful. If I didn't bring you back in one piece, Anko would skin me alive." As he healed her wound, the red-eyed woman was astounded by how soft his touch was. She wondered how gentle he was in other places, but she quickly pushed the thought away in embarrassment before blushing a few seconds later when she realized the innuendo in her words. She said, "Thank you, Naruto-kun. I'm glad you haven't lost your gentle touch after spending so much time with Anko." Since he knew that now was not the time to discuss this with her, Kakashi, who was now close enough to hear it, raised an eyebrow and filed it away. He looked at the others, who were either unharmed or only slightly wounded, and asked, "Are you okay to move, Kurenai?" Kurenai nodded as she slowly got to her feet, stretching a little to test her new flesh. She turned to Sasuke, her eyes hardening glaringly, and said, "Hi, I'm just a little tired. We can move out as soon as everyone is ready." She shouted angrily, Uchiha Sasuke, front and center, to get the boys' attention. Expecting to receive praise for eliminating 4 mercs, Sasuke strolled over and smirked while feigning a salute. "Hi, Kurenai-sensei." Seeing such a flagrant display of arrogance only made Kurenai more irate, and she allowed it to show in her voice. "You have disobeyed a direct order, abandoned your post, and endangered the lives of your teammates, fellow Konoha ninja, and a contracted client. This will go on report, and if you try something like this again, I will not only have your shinobi license revoked, but have you up on charges." Sasuke was initially taken aback, but he soon became irate at the reprimand. "I am a Uchiha. You don't have the right to do any such thing. You should be kneeling before me like the rest of the useless whores calling themselves Kunoichi," he replied with pride. Naruto hurried from his position a few feet away from Kurenai upon hearing the "Golden Boy," and struck him in the jaw with a backfist, sending him to the ground before putting his boot on Sasuke's throat. Naruto practically growled out, applying pressure to his foot, which caused Sasuke to choke slightly and grab his leg in an effort to release the pressure. "You are a pathetic fool. Under the Shinobi Code of Conduct laws, I could kill you right now, and probably get a commendation for it. In case you have forgotten, if you even read the rules, insubordination in the field can be punished by death if the ranking member of the team chooses to. Do I make myself clear, you piece of shit?" He leaned down, creating the tread of his boots dig into the flesh just above Sasuke's collarbone. "The only thing stopping me is that Kurenai-chan has yet to give the order, but I will tell you this: if you ever speak to her like that again or disobey her orders on a whim, I will kill you on the spot, no questions asked." As he gasped for air, Sasuke made an unsuccessful attempt to push the boot off his throat. He halted after a short while and gave Naruto a fierce look while croaking an affirmative answer. "Good." The irate blonde backed off reluctantly, controlling his ki, and said, "Now get your shit together, and be ready to move out." Kakashi wanted to get involved in the scene, but he knew Sasuke had earned it through his own deeds. He was unable to ignore the glance Kurenai was giving Naruto behind his back as he watched. When he saw not only approval but, if he was correct, love, his eyes widened a little. He made the decision to have a lengthy discussion with his fellow Jonin about mingling with subordinates as soon as the chance arose. He sighed inwardly at this complication and motioned for the rest of his team to return to formation. Naruto stayed close to Kurenai in case she needed additional medical assistance, but the other genin soon joined them. Everyone was prepared in a flash, and the Jonin noted who needed to be consulted regarding their murderous deed. Only 3 people who had fought appeared to be impacted by the deaths, and they were all genins. Sasuke was clenching and unclenching his hands. Kiba continued to rub his nose before looking at his hands, and Hinata, in spite of her training and determination, was unsteady and her eyes kept darting all over the place like a rabbit spotting a hawk. After exchanging glances, the Jonin agreed to speak with each other at Tazuna's. Kurenai then gave the order to leave, with Tazuna now being carried by Kakashi as they traveled at ninja speed to their destination. A short, balding man brandishing a cane yelled at his subordinates for their ineptitude after learning that his men had failed. It took him more than an hour to settle down, but once he did, his avaricious little mind came up with a plan that would not only finish the task at hand, but also save him money. A few days later, the small man encountered a tall, well-built man with a big sword on his back and bandages covering his face, as well as a smaller individual wearing a mask and hunting ninja outfit leaning back in his chair. The man with the cane spoke to the big ninja. "You have heard the offer, Zabuza, do you accept?" Before nodding his head, Zabuza examined him and the contract on the desk. "Yeah, I accept 10 million for the head of the bridge builder plus any expenses while in your service. You have a deal, Gato." Making plans, surveying the area, and putting up traps that would sound an alarm if the wrong people attempted to approach Tezuna's house took up the first few days there. Tezuna was guarded at the bridge by one team during 2 shifts, while his daughter and grandson were guarded at the house by the other. Everything had taken 3 days to settle, and Kakashi didn't have a chance to talk to Kurenai in private until the 4th day, about 2 miles from the house, before he brought up the topic. They were scouting the woods while Team 7 protected Tezuna and Team 8 looked after the rest of his family. Kakashi said gravely, "Kurenai, there is something I think we need to talk about." The rookie Jonin gave him a questioning look. She stopped on the next branch she landed on and asked, "What is it?" He sighed as he landed on the same branch. Understanding that this needed to be handled carefully, he held his hands in front of his chest, palms facing her, and said, "I saw something after the fight, and since that has me a little concerned, don't take any offense to this. Please. As a fellow Jonin sensei, I have to know, are you showing favoritism on your team?" She crossed her arms and asked, "What are you talking about?" as she began to become irate over the charge. He said plainly, "I've seen the way you look at Strife." Kurenai turned her head away from him and lowered her arms to her sides. Her voice became a whisper as she said, "It's nothing. Kakashi, he's already engaged to Anko, and Tenten, not to mention his first love has shown up." Even though she spoke softly, Kakashi's seasoned ears picked it up and were forced to consider the mystery that was Strife Naruto even more. "I'm being serious. Kurenai, I need to know if your feelings are going to affect not only the mission, but your team as well. If you can't control yourself, I'll have to inform Hokage-sama about it, and neither of us would like that." He was attempting to appear sympathetic. Knowing he was right and only carrying out his duty, she let out a deep sigh and rested her back against the tree. Her tone remained somber throughout, and toward the end it began to crack under the weight of the emotions she was trying to suppress. "I know what you were trying to say, Kakashi, and you were right. I don't know when or how I started to fall for him, but I won't let it interfere with my duty as a Jonin sensei. He doesn't know how I feel, and I plan on keeping that way. Anko is my best friend and I don't want to break her heart by trying to steal her fiancé, especially after all she's been through in her life. She deserves to be happy." She began to cry and put her arms around her stomach as she said the final sentence. When Kakashi saw the Ice Queen of Konoha start crying, his eyes widened in amazement at how much she loved the blonde teenager. He was trying to come up with something to cheer her up while running a hand through his hair, but he was completely at a loss at last. He put a gentle hand on her shoulder and spoke to her politely. Lamely, he patted her shoulder and said, "It'll be okay. Kurenai, I'm sure you'll figure something out. If it gets too bad, you could always talk to Anko about it since you two are best friends, right?" When he said that, Kurenai's head jerked up, and she saw that Anko probably wouldn't mind sharing him, but she was afraid of what Anko would do to her. In a jealous rage, her tears slowed and eventually stopped as she processed that thought. Kakashi smiled and gave her a handkerchief. "See? Nothing to worry about now. We should finish scouting so we can get back, and you can get yourself together," he replied with kindness. Kurenai wiped her face and nodded with renewed optimism before leaping to another tree farther along their path. She said, "Of course, let's get going." As he followed her through the trees, Kakashi sighed at the state of affairs. What a mess, on a mission like this. This is the last thing we need. Finding Gato and getting rid of him quickly will allow us to return to Konoha. Gato was conversing with Zabuza in a cabin tucked away in the woods, and he didn't like the way he was being screamed at. "What the hell are you doing? I am paying you a lot of money to take care of the bridge builder, and all you are doing is sitting on your ass while you get more of the bridge done every day. If you don't do something soon, I will find someone else that can get the job done." He yelled at the big guy and tried to hit him with his cane. A bladed gauntlet that was clearly dripping with poison slashed the cane into pieces as he attempted to strike Zabuza. With a good deal of ki, the gauntlet's owner said, "You really have no idea who you are fucking with. Little man Tezuna will die before the bridge is complete. Now I suggest you leave before your usefulness drops below what you are paying us." Gato growled and retreated behind his alleged samurai before leaving Zabuza and the other shinobi alone. He yelled, "Fine, but make sure it gets done or you won't get paid," and hurried away. Zabuza put his feet up on the table and said, "You didn't have to do that, Gozo. We need the money he is paying us." "I know, but he pisses me off. You should have the Bishi partner of yours assassinate him and raid his treasury. I hate dealing with egotistical people like him that can't back up their mouths." Meizo came out of hiding and said, "I have to agree with brother on this. Zabuza, I have a bad feeling about working for this guy. As Nuke Nin we don't have many options, and Haku is scouting the area along with the people Tazuna has hired until we have the information. Just relax, we'll attack after a plan is made, and when the enemy is complacent." A few days later, just after dawn, Shino was deep in the woods looking for new bug species to catalog. His bugs warned him that someone was coming. While he was crouching and watching a beetle scuttle across the grass, he placed some bugs close to him in case she was attacked, and as usual, he had them watch her. When he heard someone walking, he turned his head slightly and saw that it was a girl with a small basket in a light blue kimono with white stripes. After a brief pause upon seeing him, the girl quickly resumed her journey. The girl smiled courteously and said, "Good morning." Shino kept the beetle in his line of sight as he turned his head to face her. "Good morning." His tone was stoic as usual. She picked a little flowering plant and put it in her basket, saying, "It's unusual to see someone in this part of the woods. Are you lost?" "No, I am not lost. I am cataloging some of the insect species I have found in the forest." She asked, "That sounds interesting. Have you found anything new?" While she kept adding items to her basket. "Nothing that has not already been cataloged by other members of my family." Before Sakura arrived, they talked like this for a few more minutes. The pink-haired girl said, a little breathless, "There you are. Shino, Kurenai-sensei wanted me to find you to let you know breakfast was ready." Shino stood stoically and said, "Thank you, Sakura. I will return momentarily." He bowed respectfully to the girl and said, "It has been good to talk with you this morning. Thank you for the conversation." Sakura, who had not previously noticed the girl, opened her eyes wide when she saw the lovely girl gathering herbs. She blushed with jealousy at the girl's poise as she got up and gave Shino her bow. The dark-haired girl picked up her basket and said, "You are very welcome. I enjoyed it a lot." Shino had turned around and was heading back toward Tazuna's when he came to a halt a short distance away. Since the pinkette hadn't moved since seeing the unidentified girl, he asked, "Are you coming, Sakura?" She ran after the bug user, blushing once more. "Huh? Oh, yes," she exclaimed. With a contemplative expression on her face, the girl held her basket while she watched them vanish through the trees. They seem to be nothing more than low-level ninja, and certainly not capable of what Gato told us. That boy could be a little dangerous, though I'll have to inform Zabuza-sama about this before I do some more scouting. The Konoha ninja trained and guarded the family alternately over the course of the following 2 weeks. A tense environment had been developing around Naruto and the Jonin during this time. Kakashi always appeared to be keeping an eye on events and rerouting the Genin's inquiries. Kurenai became increasingly reclusive and was frequently heard sobbing at night. Every day, Naruto became more irritable and would spend hours training when he wasn't on guard duty. As a result of the tension, the other ninja became jittery and cautious around the three. Hinata had made numerous attempts, all unsuccessful, to learn what was troubling the woman who had taken on the role of mother to her. Every time she considered the possible cause, she could only think of one. Naruto the Genin was being kept in the dark about something that was happening. She chose to confront Kakashi because she was aware that neither Naruto nor Kurenai would respond after dinner. She finally had a chance when he was gazing out over the water. With a calm voice, Hinata asked, "Kakashi-sensei, do you have a few minutes?" The man noticed a hint of concern in her voice and turned to face her. "What can I help you with, Hinata?" "I know there is something going on that we are not being told. Naruto-san is more on edge with each passing day. Kurenai-sensei is full of pain, and I can tell it is tearing her apart from within. My team is falling apart, Kakashi-sensei, and I don't know why." With a heavy sigh, Kakashi prayed to Obito in silence for clarification. He remarked somberly as he considered the current circumstance, Obito and Rin, and how he had let them down. "They're dealing with personal matters. Hinata, all we can do is complete our mission, and watch over them. You and Shino have to be strong. It falls to both of you to keep your team whole. I failed my team, do not fail yours." Hinata could hear the anguish and sorrow in Kakashi's voice because it reflected her own feelings. Ever since her childhood sweetheart passed away, her eyes were moist with unshed tears as she gazed up at him. "Surely there is something we could do? I cannot let Kurenai-sensei and Naruto-san continue like this. We have to help them." Kakashi was completely clueless about what to do, even though she knew she was correct. "I don't know if we can help them. Let them know you are there for them, but let them make the first move. If they do ask for your help, give it to them. They are fighting their own demons, and will need all the strength you can give them." If Kakashi's attitude was any clue as to how bad things were, Hinata wiped her eyes and wondered what exactly was wrong. She inhaled deeply and decided to do everything in her power to support her teammates. The girl bowed and went back inside, saying, "I will not fail them. I failed the love of my life and I will not repeat the same mistake with my team." Kakashi glanced at Kurenai's room window and watched her until the door closed behind her. He looked up at the stars and saw the faces of people he had failed to tell, and he sighed deeply. You should tell him you are only hurting yourself, and those around you. When he saw the faces of his deceased teammates, he muttered, "I'm sorry." When everyone was seated for dinner a few nights later, Tezuna's grandson Inari caught everyone's attention by abruptly slamming his hand on the table. "You are all fools. What makes you think that people like you who haven't suffered could understand what we are going through?" The boy's words startled everyone into silence, but that was short-lived as Naruto got to his feet with such force that the chair he was sitting on slammed into the wall behind him. The blonde's voice was so icy that it made Kakashi shudder. "Haven't suffered?" she asked at this point. Waves of anger, grief, regret, pain, and a profound sense of loss could be felt rolling off of him. "What would a child like you know of suffering? Our parents died the day my twin brother and I were born. I was sent away to a distant land for my protection, and my brother had a demon lord sealed within him. When Naruto finally returned to the village where we were born, he said, 'A year ago I was forced to leave the woman I fell in love with, only to find out later that she miscarried our son. Finally, when I do return to the village where our father had died to protect, I find out that my brother was murdered by the same people our father had died to protect, but that was only after years of beating, torture, ridicule, theft, swindling, and abuse. Don't you ever say that you know what it means to suffer.' With a few exceptions, the majority of the people in attendance reacted with sheer shock and disbelief. Sasuke simply turned his head away and harumphed. Shino had raised his eyebrows to the point where they were concealed by his hair. Both Sakura and Tsunami were crying aloud. Even though Hinata was crying when she learned that her beloved had been killed, she prayed to Naruto that he was lying about the boy who had passed away before she could tell him how much she loved him. Her tone begged him to tell him it was a lie. Hey, Anyo, is that true, Naruto-san? Was his life really that bad?" she said. After staring at Hinata for what felt like several long minutes, Naruto shifted his gaze from Inari and took out an old, battered book from inside his vest. After examining the object for a moment, Naruto's expression softened before he replaced it and left the room. As demonstrated by Kiba's deep growl at Inari, the sound of the door closing appeared to have the effect of reviving everyone's movement. Kiba stormed out of the house more violently than Naruto had, followed by his dog companion Akamaru. "His brother was my best friend, you little shit. Strife-san won't harm you, but I suggest you keep your mouth shut from now on or I will rip your tongue out," Kiba said. Thinking of the friends and family he had lost over the years, Kakashi let out a deep sigh when he turned to face Kurenai. He saw her clutching herself and crying silently as she stared at the door. Unfortunately, what he said is true. Each of us has suffered great losses, and have learned to live with it, each in our own way. Right now we should eat so that Tsunami-san's cooking doesn't go to waste. A small group of women was making their way to the Hokage's tower while Naruto's events were taking place. The shortest member of the group was well known for casually carrying enough weapons to arm a small country. The tallest was feared by nearly everyone in Konoha for her sadistic tendencies, and the last member was unknown in Konoha despite being even more dangerous than the other two combined. Every woman had a look on their faces that made it obvious that they would suffer more than they could have ever imagined if someone stood in their way. For this reason, when they reached the Hokage's office, his secretary immediately allowed them entry. Anko, Yuffie, and Tenten entered and positioned themselves in front of Sarutobi's desk, standing side by side. To get the old man's attention, Anko firmly said, "We need to talk, Hokage-sama." Before speaking to the Tokubetsu Jonin, he glanced up from the paperwork and noted her companions. "Judging by the look on your face, this is important, but why don't you introduce me to your friend first?" The woman's eyes hardened and she crossed her arms. "Cut the crap. You know damn well who I am, and don't even try to deny it. Now tell us why you think all these fucking secrets are so important that you have let Koichi go through hell." Sarutobi simply let out a deep sigh in spite of her tone and clear disrespect. "There are reasons for what has happened, Kasaragi-san, many of which involve classified information that even Anko-san doesn't have the clearance for." "That's bullshit." Yuffie glared at him and screamed. "Do you have any idea what he went through in this village before we met? Can you even imagine the number of times he was beaten, poisoned, abused, tortured, and nearly raped? You can try to justify it however you want, but for the good of the village, excuse isn't going to cut it with us." Every story of the village's abuse of Naruto over the years made the Hokage cringe, and he could readily relate to the feelings of the women in front of him. He closed his eyes tightly, inhaled deeply, and motioned for them to sit. You have to understand that even though I am the Hokage, my hands were mostly tied concerning Naruto. I did what I could for him as did others, but there was only so much we could do without putting not only our families at risk, but the security of the village as well. The Ichirakus were only one of the families that suffered from trying to help Naruto. Wait, what do you mean? After removing the Hokage hat and placing it on the table, Sarutobi combed through his hair. Naruto doesn't even know this, but when he was 7 Tucci tried to adopt him. Unfortunately, because he was a civilian, it had to be approved by the civilian council. Over the next week there were many threats, most of which he ignored, until they started targeting Ayame. He gave a solemn nod. That's right, when he refused to bow to their wishes they made a point of putting more than her life in danger, and he had no choice but to back off to keep his only daughter safe. Luckily she was in school at the time, so she doesn't know either. Do you see now the kind of people I have had to deal with over the years? Hearing how far the villagers would go to torture the man they love left the women stunned before Yuffie finally broke the stifling silence that had gripped the room for several long minutes. Yuffie looked up at the elderly man and said, "Even though I don't like it, I can understand your position, but no more secrets, tell us everything." With a heavy sigh, Sarutobi Hiruzen refilled his pipe and put it aside before taking a bottle of warm sake out of a desk drawer. He reached into the drawer again and pulled out a saucer that his late wife Bawako had hand-painted with elaborate designs. After a moment of silent staring, he put it down and filled it with sake. He slowly raised the saucer, quickly drained its contents, and then refilled it. After finishing that, he lit his pipe with a little fire jutsu, took a long drag, and then turned to face each of the women in front of him. "I guess I should start from the beginning. The girls were spotted leaving the Hokage's tower an hour or so before the sun started to set. Given what they had just learned, it is not surprising that the expressions they all wore would have been ideal for a funeral. They were trying to regain some semblance of order as they shuffled their feet in a manner reminiscent of zombies when Enko's stomach roared loudly in protest of the fact that she had hardly eaten all day. She forced a laugh and smiled sickly at the other two. "I haven't eaten anything since our talk this morning." Yuffie checked the position of the sun while Tenten rubbed her own stomach and sighed at being in the same situation. The dimensional traveler said, "Given the late hour, we ought to go out to eat. Do either of you know a good place?" The snake mistress licked her lips at the thought of Dango and said, "Yeah, I know just the place. The food is great, and we won't be bothered there since it is mostly frequented by John, and plus they have cheap sake which I am sure we all could use right now." Yuffie nodded her head and Tenten muttered, "No shit." Yuffie pointed to the road in front of them and said, "Okay, lead the way." This told Anko to take the lead. The three of them were discovered entering a location with the sign, "The Swirling Leaf," about 10 minutes later. Following Anko to a table near the back, Tenten and Yuffie surveyed the space. A waitress quickly arrived to take their orders, and Anko made sure to remind the girl that the sake would be served continuously. While they were there, they were attempting to unwind while waiting for the order to be filled when a tall, blond man with a long ponytail approached the table. He was dressed in the black trench coat, gray pants, and shirt that were the standard uniform for the ANBU's torture and interrogation division. The man smiled and took a sip from the glass of sake he was holding. "Hey, Anko, I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you'd still be breaking in your fiancé." Normally, Anko would laugh and say something scathing in response to a comment like this, but instead he saw a sad expression cross her face before she looked down at the table and fiddled with a napkin. The man was taken aback by this and quickly looked at her companions. Observing that they shared a similar aura, he practically screamed that something was wrong because he was from the notorious T&I, which raised red flags and clarion calls. He sat down in the vacant chair and carefully put his glass down, wearing a serious but understanding expression. Using his skills to watch the three girls, he said softly, "What's wrong, Anko? It's not like you to act like this." Anko let out a long sigh, looked at the other two, and shrugged. "It's been a long day, Inoichi, and we got some unsettling news about Naru-kun. It doesn't help that he suddenly got sent on a mission out of country. If it's something you can talk about, I'm willing to lend an ear if you need it." When he noticed Anko covertly turning to a woman he had never seen before, as though she were deferring to her on the matter, Inoichi concealed his astonishment and interest. He took a slow sip of his sake and looked at the play that was taking place because he had a gut feeling that this was a troublesome situation that was more complex than simply getting Orochimaru to stop groping young boys. He focused more on the unidentified woman when she said, "Maybe later, after we've had time to get our heads on straight. Right now we're just trying to absorb the news, and get something to eat since it's too late to cook at home, Inoichi-san." He looked at her more closely, but after hearing her speech, he wasn't sure if he liked what he saw. She appeared to be at ease as she sat with her hands in her lap, but he could tell she was about to act quickly by the slight tenseness in some of her muscles. She was clearly an experienced warrior based on the way she looked around the room. Although there were no indications of her power, He was uneasy about the way Anko and the teenage girl appeared to follow her example. His suspicions were aroused, and he considered the possibility that a foreign kunoichi was infiltrating the village. His hand moved in a casual manner that any Anbu member would recognize. As he resolved to discuss this with the Hokage, he noticed a movement out of the corner of his eye that indicated the movement wasn't missed. He got to his feet, put his hand on Anko's shoulder, and smiled reassuringly at her. He squeezed her shoulder and turned to leave, picking up his barely touched sake. Whatever the problem is, I'm sure it will work out in the end. Just remember that you have friends willing to help whenever you need it. Anko grinned at her after noticing Yuffie's intrigued expression. That was Yamanaka Inoichi. He's the head of the Yamanaka clan, and a good friend. I work with him in Morino Ibiki at the T&I division. He is one of the few people I trust in this village. Yuffie nodded her head, understanding that he wasn't someone to be concerned about if he could still be trusted in light of what had happened today. Tenten, on the other hand, had heard horror stories about the man, just as she had Ibiki, and she looked fearfully at him as he sat at the bar with a few other jonin. As soon as their food and sake arrived, they stopped talking, and the remainder of the time was spent in silence while each woman ate almost mechanically and introspectively following their meal. They sat and drank sake while quietly discussing trivial topics. The girls decided to head home after leaving the restaurant for the evening. They stumbled around for a few blocks before leaning on one another for support and making their way back home a little more steadily. To avoid raising any red flags with the girls, Inoichi had waited for almost half an hour before leaving the bar. He took to the roofs once he was certain he was far enough away from the bar, and he arrived at the Hokage tower in record time. He hurried up the stairs, headed directly to the Hokage's office, and entered without knocking. He said, "Hokage-sama, we have a problem." Then he saw that the elderly man was very unsteady as he placed the sake dish on the desk and had multiple empty bottles of sake on his desk. He fumbled for his pipe and slurred, "Wa ishit, Inoshi-shan." Inoichi stared in disbelief, never having imagined that the man known as the Shinobi no Kami would be so inebriated. "It's about Anko and her future sister wife Tenten. I think they may be in trouble. I saw them earlier at the Swirling Leaf with an unknown woman." And Anko was not only depressed, but she was actually acquiescing to her. While Inoichi was speaking, Hiruzen had finally succeeded in filling and lighting his pipe. Inoichi's eyes widened as he blew out a huge cloud of smoke and giggled intoxicatedly. "Ish nothing to worry about, just a family matter. Ash for da woman, she ish one of Naruto's fiancés." Inoichi seriously considered doing a mind scan on the elderly man because he was unsure of what had just been said, but he decided against it for the time being because the Hokage didn't appear to be bothered by his behavior, even though it might have just been the sake in his system. Inoichi hesitantly said, "Okay, sir, I'll come back in the morning and give you a full report then." With an inebriated smile, Hiruzen waved before fumbling for one of the bottles and dropping it to the ground. Seeing the village chief in such a state, Inoichi shook his head and quietly walked away, closing the door behind him, doubting that the visit would be remembered the next day. The following morning, Tenten cringed at the smallest sound and walked slowly down the stairs to the kitchen. She walked to the table and sat down, groaning loudly to Yuffie's and Anko's amusement as she writhed in the light from the window. The teenage girl gave Anko a glare when he laughed and asked, "I take it this is your first hangover? My head feels like something is trying to claw its way out, and my stomach is churning like the bottom of a waterfall," Tenten said with a sigh. While Yuffie grinned at the teenager holding back her laughter, Anko laughed and stood up to prepare some sort of mixture for Tenten. "Don't worry, it'll pass. You also build a tolerance after a while." Tenten put her elbows on the table and held her head, saying, I don't plan on doing that often enough to even start to tolerate this." Anko put a glass in front of the teen while continuing to laugh at her uneasiness. "We all say that in the beginning, but with the life we lead, sake has a tendency to make a normal place alongside the kunai here. Drink this, make sure to down it as quickly as possible." Tenten eyed the glass, and the unsettling appearance of its contents made her stomach turn. "Is it poison?" Yuffie and Anko shook their heads and laughed at that before taking a sip of her tea. Yuffie explained, "No, it's a morning after remedy for hangovers. It tastes awful, but it works." Tenten contemplated drinking the strange substance, but ultimately concluded that she couldn't feel worse than she already did. Even if it was poison, she grimaced at the stench and slowly grasped the glass. Before downing it, she gasped a little and said, "Gah! That tastes like the inside of Lee's sandals after one of his extreme training sessions with Guy-sensei." Sitting at the table drinking tea, the two older women watched Tenten's dramatics with great amusement. Yuffie put her cup down with a loud thump to get the others' attention after Tenten had finished gagging and downed 2 glasses of water to try to wash the taste out of her mouth. Yuffie gazed at Tenten and Anko as though attempting to read their innermost thoughts. "Do you still love him?" Yuffie inquired, assessing their responses to the difficult query with her eyes. With a gentle sigh, Anko set her teacup down, following the handle's edges. She was certain of the answer and stuck to it. Although she had dealt with some of the information for years, Tenten found it all novel and questioned whether the young Kunoichi had changed in any way as a result of what she had heard the day before. Anko gave Yuffie a quick nod before focusing on Tenten, who had frozen in place at the question and had a glass of water halfway to her lips. A few seconds later, the slender brunette let the glass fall into the sink by lowering her hands to the counter's edge. The two older women silently waited for her to say something. Tenten's hangover was forgotten when she finally spoke with emotion in her voice after a long silence. Her grip tightened on the edge of the counter, and she asked in pain, "How can you ask that?" Tenten's body grew hunched as she leaned slightly over the sink. Naruto, he has been through so much, and still manages to smile and care for others where others would have reveled in slaughtering the entire village. He wants nothing more than a family to love, and be loved by. Anko and Yuffie were aware that she was crying, but they remained motionless while they waited for the teenager to calm down. Tenten eventually regained her composure and took a deep breath before turning around, her eyes still streaming down her cheeks. As she took a kunai from one of the many places she keeps them hidden on her person at all times, the teen's eyes filled with resolve. "He deserves as much as we can give him. Everything I have I give to him freely." She slid the blade slowly along her palm, letting the blood pool in her hand before tilting it slightly to let the blood drip onto the floor, all the while keeping her eyes fixed on Yuffie's. "I swear by this blood freely given to guard him, protect him, and love him in this life and the next, even at the cost of my own life." While Anko grinned proudly at the genin, Yuffie stood up and approached her, watching her without a reaction. After giving the shorter girl a brief glance, she took the kunai from her and cut her own hand. She grabbed Tenten's wrist, raised her hand, and pressed their bleeding hands together. "An oath sworn in love, and sealed by blood. No harm will not touch our beloved except over our corpses." Another bloody hand was placed on top of Tenten's and Yuffie's, and they both grinned. They turned to see Anko wearing a steely expression. As her grip tightened, the purple-haired Jonin said, "So it is sworn, so shall it be." None of them paid attention to the tiny pool of blood forming at their feet. Before they split up to tend to their wounds, they stood together in that bonding of spirit and blood. Tenten cut much deeper than she had intended and nearly severed some of the tendons in her hand, so Anko had to use a low-level medical jutsu on her following the treatment of their wounds. They sat at the table and grew closer to one another. Tenten had a contemplative expression on her face almost 2 hours after Yuffie had explained to them what Naruto had done to exact revenge on Sid for taking a photo of them during their celebration of their 6th anniversary at the Golden Saucer. "I'm really curious about something. Naruto never talks about it, but how did you get here, Yuffie?" the brunette girl responded. The response was directly related to her miscarriage, so Yuffie sighed. "All we know about how Naruto got there was that it involved the life stream. So after my recovery I went to Nanaki, and asked him about the life stream, and his thoughts about Naruto's arrival. I learned a lot from him, but we were still at a loss as to what the connection was, so after I left there I sought out a man named Hojo. He is a genius of the first order, but he also totally insane. He will do whatever it takes in the pursuit of knowledge and the advancement of science. It was 3 months before he had a breakthrough, and with Nanaki's help, he was able to build a device that locked onto Koi's communicator and tapped into the lifestream through a Mako reactor. After many experiments, Hojo was finally able to transport objects and small life forms. With the continuing successes, he built a prototype. When I heard the news I was overjoyed, and tried to get him to let me use it. He refused, saying that it needed further testing to find out a way to return what was sent." Yuffie looked into her cup, spinning it back and forth in her hands for a long moment as Tenten and Anko waited for her to finish her story. After closing her eyes and inhaling deeply, Yuffie opened them once more. "I was upset, and fought Hojo. I ended up knocking him out, and used the device before the guards arrived. I didn't care about going back as long as I was able to be with Naruto again. I used the device to send myself here, and arrived in the kitchen behind him. You know the rest." She continued to gaze at her teacup. After Tenten and Anko gathered their thoughts on Yuffie's words for a few minutes, Anko nodded to herself with a gentle tone. She asked the woman across from her, "You haven't gotten over it, have you?" As Yuffie heard Anko's words, she flinched and her hands gripped the cup more tightly. Her anguish and guilt were evident as she gazed into the Jonin's eyes. Anko looked at Tenten for a moment before grinning at Yuffie. She reached across the table and put her hand on Yuffie's, gently squeezing it as though to say, "It will be all right." With a Cheshire Cat smile, the INT member declared, "It's settled. You will be the matriarch of the Strife clan." Tenten gave Anko a startled look. "Don't you think that is Naruto's decision to make? It is his clan after all, and I put in just as much effort into it as he has, so why shouldn't I be matriarch?" First off, you are the lowest ranked ninja here as well as the youngest. Secondly, she has known Naruto the longest. Third, you and I both have ninja duties while she isn't part of the military forces. You also have to consider that the matriarch will also have to be a part of the council when Naruto can't. You would be laughed at because of your age, and most of the village hates me almost as much as they did Naruto's brother. Anyway, I imagine that she plans of giving our Naruto the family he always wanted very soon. She began to count her fingers and laughed towards the end. Anko's words caused Yuffie to flush, and Tenten briefly displayed a contemplative expression. Tenten crossed her arms to indicate that she was not changing her mind. Okay. I agree with you on that she does make a better choice than you or me, but I still think we should leave the final say to Naruto. Yuffie's voice was heavy with grief as she said, she's right, Anko, especially since Koi seems to have moved on. Anko remarked, peeved, he hasn't moved on, he keeps a picture of you two on him at all times, and nearly killed the Inuzuka mutt when he insulted you at the academy. Yuffie's expression changed from one of shock to one of smile as her heart began to grow hopeful. She glanced at Tenten and Anko with new resolve. So now that I'm staying here, how do I get ID papers? Tenten gave her a smile, and Anko chuckled before getting to his feet. Come on, we need to talk to Hokage-sama, and then go shopping. The three women proceeded to take a shower and prepare for the upcoming 45 minutes. When they were ready to leave, they left the house with big smiles on their faces and were ready to face the world if needed. Kiba was furious and decided to use his energy and rage at Inari's outburst by training in the forest, or, more precisely, by destroying about an acre of forest nearly 2 in the morning. Shortly after dawn, an ethereal beauty wearing a pale blue kimono with a floral print approaches him. He is seen to be sound asleep because he was exhausted from causing localized destruction and had taken a seat beneath a tree with Akamaru. After giving him a brief glance, the girl leaned over and put a hand on his shoulder to shake him awake. Kiba moaned and unsuccessfully attempted to brush the hand away as he stretched. He opened his eyes at last and stopped abruptly when he noticed the slender woman hunched over him. Her kimono slightly open so he could see the top of her enormous B-cup breasts. She smiled as she got back up and brushed a lock of hair behind her ear, saying, "Good morning." My goodness, she's stunning. Kiba stared at her, thinking, until she spoke, waking him from his trance. Yeah, good morning to you too. To regain his composure, he got up and brushed off his jacket and trousers. He blushed a little as he was doing this because the girl had caught him staring at her and was laughing. After finishing that, he coughed several times before grinning at her. He bowed to her after saying, "My name is Inuzuka Kiba, and this is my companion Akamaru." She gave him another look at her porcelain skin and returned his bow, saying, "I am Yuki Haku, pleasure to meet you. If I may, what were you doing sleeping out in the forest?" Recalling what had happened the night before, Kiba growled and balled his fists before he composed himself. "A little brat insulted a good friend of mine that died a few years ago, so I came out here to blow off some steam. It was either that or kill the little shit," he said with his teeth clenched. As he spoke, Haku observed him with empathy, recognizing the emotional turmoil he was experiencing as a result of the incident. Haku was thinking about her mother and how her mother killed her when she said, "I am sorry to hear that. It is always hard to lose someone close to you." Kiba recognized the tone of her voice and recognized that she had experienced something similar. He gave her a look that only someone who understands the same suffering could give. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" Haku closed her eyes and slowly nodded as she relived her mother's love and the hurt of being betrayed when her father killed her. In an attempt to control herself, she said quietly, "My father killed my mother when I was a child." Her emotional barriers were weaker than usual around this boy. For some reason, the sensation of Kiba's hands on her shoulders caused her eyes to pop open. "Losing a member of the pack is a terrible thing. The members of my clan that become shinobi train for the sole purpose of protecting those we view as members of our pack, and see anyone that turns their back on an ally or betrays the village as the worst kind of being that must be hunted down and killed with the same ferocity as a rabid badger. The loss of your mother is a terrible thing, and what your father did is unforgivable. One thing you have to remember though is that it was not your fault. You must move on, and become stronger so that you can keep the loved ones you have left safe." Looked intently into her eyes, barking to back him up. The intensity of Kiba's gaze and the diamond-hard resolve in them caught Haku off guard. As he looked into his eyes, she lifted her arm to lay her hand on top of his, and after a moment, she gave him a smile that made him believe she was an angel. "You will truly become a strong shinobi. I believe that a person can only become truly strong when they are fighting to protect someone precious to them, and I can see that you fight for that very reason." They remained in that position for a short while, grinning into each other's eyes, until Kiba blushed when she realized how they might appear to an outsider. She blushed light pink, and Kiba gave her an apologetic smile and scratched the side of his jaw. Kiba tried to avoid adding to the awkwardness of the situation by asking, "So what brings you here anyway?" Haku blushed even more as she blinked at him, forgetting her assignment. I came out here looking for some herbs for a sick friend. Kiba looked down at Akamaru, who had yipped at him and was grinning clearly as he looked up. Kiba glared at his companion after noticing his expression, then grinned at Haku. If you want I could give you a hand. Haku gave him a smile while flagrantly ignoring the dog's sounds, which were too near to laughter to be comfortable. I would like that. After that, the two engaged in light conversation for more than an hour as they gathered the herbs she required. Kiba stopped Haku as she was about to leave. I'm going to be in the area for a while, and I was wondering if we could meet again? Haku gave him a blank stare, thinking that she might have to fight him later, but she wanted to avoid that at all costs. Kiba slumped his shoulders as she turned and started to leave. Haku halted after 10 feet or so and turned to face him over her left shoulder. She said quietly as she entered the trees, I gather herbs around dawn every day. Before he threw his fist in the air and shouted loud enough to reverberate throughout the forest and make Haku smile when she heard it, Kiba watched her leave with a widening smile. Sakura was gripping the railing over the water with a look of intense distress on her face when Kakashi went outside to inform her that breakfast was almost ready. He stepped up next to Sakura and asked, Something bothering you, Sakura? I've been thinking about what Naruto-san said last night. Those things couldn't have happened. Hokage-sama wouldn't have allowed it, and yet his emotions were real. I don't know what to think, sensei. Kakashi let out a long sigh, not wanting to have to deal with this, especially while on a mission. When I was still in Anbu, I was sometimes assigned to watch over Uzumaki-san. During those times I personally stopped 25 beatings, 7 assassinations, 27 break-ins, 2 rapes, arrested 83 people, and executed 15 people. Strife-san and his brother have had harsh lives, and been through things I had hoped never to have seen since the war ended. To be perfectly honest, I am surprised that Strife-san hasn't tried to destroy Konoha for what his brother was put through. Sakura was staring at him in utter horror when he looked down. Why would they hate him so much? The Jonin put his hands in his pockets, slumped his shoulders, and closed his visible eye. That is something I can't tell you. Sandaime-sama has classified that information as a S-class secret punishable by immediate execution. Strife-san might tell you if you can gain his trust, but if not, then you will have to ask Hokage-sama about it. They're the only ones I know of that are allowed to speak of it without punishment. I can tell you that it wasn't because of something he did, but because of a burden that was forced upon him against his will. I know this is hard to hear, Sakura, but you have to get over this. We are on a dangerous mission that we know will involve fighting, and if you can't get a hold of yourself, either you or one of your teammates may end up dying. When the mission is over, I will request a break from missions for our team as well as Kurenai's team. The information that you and Hinata have come across was never meant to be known, especially by ones as young as you two, or I'm going to assign you to guarding Tsunami and Inari at the house with Hinata. Since the treat level is much lower, as Tazuna is the main target here for now, why don't you go inside and talk with Hinata? I'll fill in the others so you don't have to worry about that. Hearing this, Sakura was completely lost and unsure of what to think, so she simply nodded and walked numbly back inside, raising his right hand. Kakashi combed through his hair while exhaling deeply and pleading with Kami-sama to spare him from having to cope with the death of yet another teammate. After the Konohagakure ninja had been in wave for 3 weeks, the emotional turmoil appeared to have subsided, even to the extent of pursuing his dream of becoming Hokage. Hinata had become even more determined to become stronger and transform Konoha into something of which Uzumaki Naruto would have been proud. When they weren't on separate guard rotations, Shino trained with her and became attracted to the heiress. After realizing this, he gave it some thought and concluded that, while he was physically drawn to her, was that all there was to it? He pondered whether Hinata was experiencing any of the same emotions. He made the decision to use social interaction to learn more because he was aware that his clan was not well liked due to their strong ties to the colonies. It was little things like spending time with her, giving her some sweet pastries from his trips into town, and a flower he thought she would like to press. As far as Hinata was concerned, the data was still equivocal, but he quickly came to the conclusion that he liked her as more than just a friend or teammate. After speaking with Hinata, Sakura concluded that the heiress was far more than just a conceited Hyuga. When she wasn't swooning over Sasuke, she also began to take her training more seriously, even quitting dieting. As he explained to his fellow ninja, Kiba had been training every day before dawn, but he was also getting to know Haku. The two had talked a lot, picked herbs, and engaged in other routine activities. The male Inuzuka heir was rapidly becoming fond of her and was dreading the conclusion of the mission. Sasuke had insisted that Kakashi teach him more jutsu, but the Cyclops had told him that learning any new jutsu would be useless until he had mastered water walking and tree climbing naturally. This led to the Uchiha brooding and further separating himself from others. The majority of Kakashi's time was spent conversing with Kurenai and the teams. He did everything in his power to rescue her from her emotional quagmire because, as a military officer, he detested the predicament the two teams were in. On that front, he had had mixed results. If Kurenai and Anko hadn't been so close, it might not have been as horrible, but they were practically sisters. That was terrible enough on its own. But when you consider how Orochimaru had harmed Anko and how the villagers treated her, it was all one big mess as Team 7 attempted to apprehend Tora. Kakashi undoubtedly wished he was back in Konoha, reading his Icha Icha. Having had plenty of time to reflect on his future in Konoha, Naruto had become more composed and had taken his role as the Jonin's subordinate leader very seriously to better prepare the other genin for the inevitable attack Gato would send at them. He had begun drumming them in security, stealth, observation, speed, and stamina. Kurenai could still be found most of the time gazing into space, but she spent more time outside the room that Tsunami had given her. She was aware that she needed to discuss her feelings for Naruto with Anko, but the mission made that impossible, and she found herself wanting him more and more over time. She was extremely concerned that she would do something that would upset her friendship with the snake mistress of Konoha, and cause Naruto to have issues with his other fiancé, particularly now that Yuffie had arrived in Konoha. Tazuna was wiping perspiration from his brow and thinking about this situation. He was proud of how well things were going as he looked over the bridge. He predicted that Gato's stranglehold on the island would be loosened once the bridge was finished, which should happen in no more than 2 weeks. Nevertheless, he was concerned about a few things he had heard the ninja discussing. The small village had been too quiet lately, and tension had reached almost tolerable heights. He glanced at his present guards and saw the pink-haired girl administering first aid to a worker who had cut his hand. He noticed the untamed-looking boy and his dog walking the entire length of the bridge when he turned to the left. He looked more closely and noticed the blonde boy standing on one of the pylons, keeping watch over the water. He took a swig from his canteen and wondered how 8 ninjas would stop Gato if he chose to focus the majority of his forces on them. Tazuna had witnessed some of the ninja training and was amazed and terrified by the devastation they could do, even though Gato had resources, power, and numbers on his side. As an elderly man who had witnessed the atrocities committed by ninjas during battle, Tazuna was aware that any outcome would be unsightly and result in many fatalities when it was all over. His only true concern was whether his family and the villagers would still be alive. The bridge's construction had been proceeding steadily over the previous few weeks. Most employees stayed because they saw hope in the 2 ninja squads that were protecting them, but a few left out of fear, and no one could really blame them given what Gato had done to them. Tazuna projected that the bridge would be finished in 3 days, and it was now long enough for one of the workers to toss a stone to the mainland with sufficient force. Tazuna's family and the villagers were cheerful, but the ninjas weren't. Being aware that an attack could occur at any moment, the Konoha ninja were constantly on high alert. They met the night before and decided that only a small portion of Gato's mercenary forces would be used, along with any ninja he had hired for the bridge, if he decided to attack the house while Tazuna was working on it. They then decided to set traps around the house and have Kurenai cast several genjutsus on both the house and the traps. She would also act as Tsunami and Inari's bodyguard. The others would guard the bridge collectively while on alternating patrols throughout the area. Kakashi was surprisingly absent from his ubiquitous orange book as the genin rechecked their equipment and ate a ration bar. He watched as the younger ninja prepared themselves to ensure they didn't miss anything. After they were all prepared and Tazuna had bid his family farewell, Kakashi got up and gave the all clear for everyone to leave. "Alright, everyone, you know your assignments, so let's get going. 5-minute check-ins until the bridge, then every 10 minutes. Guard team, I want you in Alpha 3 formation. Scout team, take up Delta 2 formation on a Gamma 5 rotation. Keep radio silence unless reporting and move it." Following that, Tazuna walked alongside Kakashi as the teams ventured out into the morning mist. Haku watched from a tree as the Demon Brothers tied up the civilians together near where some of the supplies were piled after knocking them out. She considered telling Zabuza about her meetings with Kiba as she watched, but she changed her mind and prayed that he wouldn't be on the bridge today. After the brothers had completed their work, Zabuza signaled for them to stand on the bridge and concealed it with Kirigakure no Jutsu. As she pondered over the previous few weeks and her mounting hesitancy to complete this mission, Haku absently pulled out a senbon and played with it behind her mask. A smile appeared on her lips as she recalled how nice it felt to perform such a basic task while sitting beneath a tree with Kiba. She was unaware that she had been lost in her thoughts for more than an hour when Kakashi's voice pulled her from them. Kakashi gestured for the others to form up in battle formation, saying, "Looks like Gato's hired Kiri Nin to do his dirty work for him." Though the source was invisible, a deep chuckle could be heard coming from the mist. Kakashi no Sharingan, a class shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato, said to have copied over 1000 jutsus. Out of respect for a shinobi of your skill, I will give you one chance to hand over to Zuna without a fight. Kakashi said, releasing a kunai from its holster. I wish we could, but I have Konoha's reputation to think about. After all, it wouldn't look good if we just gave up our client like that. As the mist cleared enough for the Konoha ninja to see the bound workers and the enemy ninja, Zabuza remarked, I understand, but that still leaves us at a crossroads. As bad as it would look on Konoha, it would look even worse if I didn't finish this mission, since Nukenin like me have to keep our reputations up even more than the villages do. Even though it was invisible, Haku's expression was troubled, and she gripped the senbon she was holding more tightly. The boy she had been thinking so much about was standing across from her, prepared to defend not just his client's life but also his own. She prayed that he would win this fight, knowing that she couldn't hold her hand up to him as her stomach tightened. She looked at the others and saw that even with the training the Konoha nin had received in the previous weeks, their numbers did not give them an advantage in terms of power. Although the missing nin were outnumbered 5-4, each of the Nukenin were at least mid-shunin, with Zabuza being on par with Kakashi, if not better. In contrast, there were 4 genin and 1 jonin. She owed Zabuza too much for saving her from the Kiri bloodline war. Despite her desire to end the fight before it began, she tightened her hold on the senbon as she felt her hand begin to shake, bracing herself for what was about to happen.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.